Secretary of Defense. Marco Rubio was there. And the one question that lawmakers, even Republican allies of the president's, like Lindsey Graham, for example, had asked the officials in the room behind closed doors, what does this look like for Maduro? You are going after these oil tankers. You are intercepting these drug boats that you say are carrying drugs that could harm the American people. But what about Nicolas Maduro? And it is even in that room a couple of weeks ago, Peter, that lawmakers in a classified setting couldn't get answers. Lindsey Graham told me, for example, after that briefing, Peter, that he asked point blank, is it regime change that you are pursuing? Do you want to take Maduro down? To be clear, Graham and other Republicans thought that the administration should take this step, but it is not an answer, Peter, that they received in that room. And now, as Congress heads back to Washington after this holiday break, that is the question that Democrats, that Republicans are going to be asking. But so far, for most Republicans, praise of this administration. When it comes to the president, what's next? He will deliver that news conference in a couple of hours from now. He said, too, in an interview with the New York Times earlier this morning that he plans to answer the question of what authority the administration had and what their plans are next for Maduro. Peter.
Julie Surkin, thank you so much for your expert knowledge of the situation on the Hill as it relates to those lawmakers. I want to add one thing to this conversation right now, and you can see how the criticism of the president's actions is already developing even before dawn here. I'm stuck in a building, so can't even tell. I guess it is now dawn in the United States. We've been covering this since the pre-dawn hours early this morning. The criticism focuses on a variety of things. The president has made clear that his concern, his focus on Venezuela, the illegitimate leader, as the president describes it, focuses on Maduro's drug trafficking, his role in that effort. But obviously, there has also been criticism that a matter of weeks ago, just over a month ago, the president pardoned the former Honduran president, Juan Orlando Hernandez, who had been convicted on drug trafficking charges. So you can see even at this early morning hour, how some of the criticism is developing, questions about the authority under which the president was acting, questions about comes with a ripple effect. The fallout not unique to Venezuela, but to the region around it as well. We are now hearing from the Colombian president in neighboring Colombia, President Petro, there saying that its forces will be deployed to the Venezuelan border and that they are preparing for refugees. This was in the form of a post. So, as we have talked about, one of our experts overnight telling us that as many as 8 million Venezuelans have fled that country over the course of the last series of years amid their concerns about the authoritarian government, concerns about inflation, and broad human rights concerns that have existed there as well. We are, though, hearing from the Venezuelan regime, or members of what now appears to be the decapitated regime, the country's vice president this morning on state-run television saying, after President Trump's announcement that Nicolas Maduro's location remained unknown to her, and asked that President Trump provide proof of life. It's a good question. We do not know where Maduro is at this time. We do know, according to lawmakers that have spoken to Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, that he is expected to face justice, as they describe it, for criminal charges against him.
This is an NBC News special report.
Good day to you. I'm Peter Alexander here in New York with a dramatic developing situation taking place on the ground in Caracas, Venezuela. We have been watching the situation develop over the course of the last several hours, bringing you live coverage after a large scale strike on the ground there with fiery explosions seen throughout the city. And then from the president, we heard only a short time ago, President Trump on Truth Social posting the following in a stunning and dramatic development, saying the United States of America has successfully carried out a large-scale strike against Venezuela and its leader, President Nicolas Maduro, who President Trump says has been, along with his wife, captured. He says he has been captured and flown out of the country. This operation was done, the president says, in conjunction with U.S. law enforcement. He says details to follow, announcing a news conference to take place at 11 o'clock this morning, roughly 5.5 hours from now at his Mar-a-Lago estate. Right now, you are looking at a live picture. Well, there is the president's post on social media. But let's show you again that live picture on the ground of a more calm, at least from the sky, situation in Venezuela. Now dawn breaking above the capital city there, and it is a new dawn for that country without Maduro, who the U.S. had accused for months of being an illegitimate leader, saying he was the head of a narco-terrorist regime. He is no longer in power. Real questions right now about who is governing that country. Will it take one of two different forks in the road? Will it be a country that is governed by a new Democratic-led government, or will it be one that continues to follow the path of Nicolas Maduro? We have a series of questions that have yet to be answered. We have reached out to those at the White House, the Pentagon, and State Department for some answers to those questions, including where is Nicolas Maduro right now? Where is he being taken? Will he face justice, as it were, in a U.S. court of law in the United States? Was this a negotiated exit? We do not know about that just yet as well. Maduro, only a matter of days ago, had told a Spanish journalist that he was open to conversations with the United States. The president himself has said publicly that the focus has been on ending the illegal flow of drugs from Venezuela into the U.S. The president says it's fentanyl. Experts in that region say most often Venezuela is responsible for the flow of cocaine, notably to Europe, but some of it gets to the United States, of course, as well. We are also trying to get new details about the operation that has taken place on the ground. But as we look at some of the video from earlier in the distance, you can see some of the glowing lights, the fiery explosions that had taken place. We know that there were low-flying helicopters reported by eyewitnesses on the ground as well that likely would have been needed to be a part of any operation of this kind. Not a kill operation like the one involving Osama bin Laden more than a decade ago. This a capture operation that ultimately picked up Nicolas Maduro. We are joined by some of our best in the business, our colleagues, Richard Engel, Courtney Kuby at the Pentagon, our chief international correspondent, Keir Simmons, and Gabe Gutierrez, who covers the White House with me as well. Let's begin with Richard Engel, if we can, for a moment. Richard, I just want to reset the situation, get your reaction to the headline this morning. As you and I were on the air, as I read that post out loud, both of us were stunned by the announcement that Maduro had been captured and taken out of the country.
So the first indication we got that something dramatic had happened was several hours ago. We've been on air for several hours now, Peter, when we heard these vague reports, still unconfirmed, of explosions in Caracas and in potential other areas. And then a key detail emerged: helicopters. Witnesses described helicopters on the ground, hovering, sounds of aircraft, explosions in multiple locations. As soon as you start hearing helicopters hovering, you get an indication that this is an extraction operation. You obviously can't land fixed-winged aircraft in the middle of a city. But who was the target? What happened? Who was carrying it out? And then a short while we were discussing all of these scenarios, President Trump himself, and by no accident, President Trump himself, the Pentagon has been silent. So up until now, this is something of a pattern where major announcements are made by President Trump personally on Truth Social. President Trump announced that it was Nicolas Maduro and his wife who had been captured, and that they will face justice. And thank you for your attention to this matter. Richard, the question that everyone is asking right now is, did the United States, did President Trump just carry out a successful regime change? because regime change has just happened. And will this open the door to a democratic opposition, better economic relations, a weakening of an alliance backed by Cuban intelligence all across the region, a new Latin America where the U.S. has a much stronger hand? Or did tonight President Trump just send Venezuela into uncertain territory for sure, but civil war and a power struggle that the United States will have to either watch from afar or be drawn in to try and contain?
Richard, I apologize for my interruption. I only want to share some new information that I received while you were speaking there. This is coming from the Republican Senator of Utah, Mike Lee, who had spoken only a matter of hours ago, as we shared during our live coverage, criticizing this asking how and what constitutional act was taking place where the Congress had not been notified of this. Mike Lee has now posted a new statement where he says he just spoke to the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. He says that Rubio informed him that Nicolas Maduro has been arrested by U.S. personnel to stand trial on criminal charges in the United States, and that the kinetic action, the strikes that we saw tonight in effect, was deployed to protect and defend those executing the arrest warrant. So that this was the primary mission, the strikes, in the words of Mike Lee, detailing what he was told by the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, that those strikes were basically to help protect those who were executing this arrest warrant. This action, Lee adds, likely falls within the president's inherent authority under Article 2 of the Constitution to protect U.S. personnel from an actual or imminent attack. Now, the lawmakers will, of course, fight over the circumstances behind this, how this is being conducted. But let's focus again on what we know is happening right now with our senior national security correspondent, Courtney Kuby, who is up early as we begin this new year together. Courtney, again, the major headline there, the capture of Nicolas Maduro and the successful carrying out of this large-scale strike against Venezuela. What are your sources telling you? Do we have any better understanding of who would have been behind this effort? Obviously, it requires some of the special forces type units to be able to accomplish a mission of this kind.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we need to keep in mind here, Peter, is the U.S. military, when it's come to some of these recent actions in the region, so specifically the interdictions of these oil tankers, the military has been in support of law enforcement here. Based off of the way the president posted this on Truth Social, his own social media platform, of course, that he started, based on the way that he wrote about this, it does appear that this was law enforcement that was in the lead here. We're still trying to get more information about that. The U.S. military, though, it appears was involved in sort of shaping the locations so that the law enforcement and potentially other U.S. agencies would be able to go in.
Sorry, Courtney, please continue.
Would be able to go in and sort of clear the space so that they could go in and then arrest Nicolas Maduro and his wife or take them into custody. So the kinds of things that we are seeing from social media video, as we know, we've seen the statement from the president, but that's really all the detail that we're getting. The video does appear to show transport helicopters, Chinooks, but there also appear to be some smaller helicopters there. Now, we don't know what those are. But we do know what is in the region right now. There is a very elite Air Force unit known as the 160th Special Operations. You may have heard of them because they were involved in taking the Navy SEALs into bin Laden's compound in May of 2011. They have assets there, including Little Birds, so these tiny little helicopters that move very fast, fly low to the ground. So we know that those sorts of assets are in the area that could have been used here. But I also found it very interesting that President Trump didn't specifically refer to the strikes that occurred as sort of the shaping operations in advance of the U.S. personnel going in on the ground there. He didn't necessarily refer to those as airstrikes. And remember some other assets the U.S. has built up. Remember, over the last couple of months, the military has flooded that region with a ton of air power and power at sea. Power at sea is the key here. They have a number of different ships who have the ability to launch Tomahawks, TLAMs. Those are very precise missiles. We have seen the U.S. military military launched them in recent years in many different cases, so many cases, Libya, Syria, other times, where they need to hit a specific target and they need what's known as standoff capability. So essentially they want to be free or safe from any kind of air defenses or other systems in the area that they are trying to target. So at this point, it's not clear exactly what the Venezuelan military may have done in response to any of this. We have not seen any indication that there was any kind of immediate response when the aircraft were going or when these strikes were occurring. But remember another thing that the military has been doing in recent weeks and months now, and that is flying missions close to the airspace that would become Venezuelan airspace. So right up to the border of international airspace, international waters, right up to the border of Venezuela. A lot of times the military will do that for a reason. It's not just testing routes. It's not just seeing what they can see. It's trying to figure out exactly what the air defense is in a place, how they respond to an aircraft. So it's known as painting an aircraft. Does the air defenses that are potentially lined up along the border there of Venezuela, are they latching onto U.S. military aircraft when they fly up close to Venezuelan airspace? This would give the military, over the course of the last several weeks when we've seen them do this time and time again, even with things like long-range bombers, are the Venezuelan air defenses painting those aircraft? How quickly do they respond? This gives the military, the U.S. military, essentially a pattern of life of how the Venezuelan military would respond to aircraft flying in. So all of these things that we have seen occur over the last several weeks and months with the military, the buildup, the exercises, the routines that they have been flying, what they have been doing, it appears that it's all been building up to this, Peter. But the big question that we still don't have a good answer to is, beyond the strikes and beyond what appears to be providing a lift to law enforcement and other U.S. officials as part of this picking up Maduro and his wife, what other component, what other part did the U.S. military play in this? We just don't have an answer to that at this point, Peter.
Courtney Kube covers the Pentagon for us right now. I want to share some other information while you, Courtney, have been speaking. Again, as we're monitoring the situation there, as we try to get a better understanding of Nicolas Maduro's whereabouts and the evolving situation there. The New York Times posting a short time ago that it has spoken to President Trump early this morning, where in its words, it celebrated the success of the mission to capture the Venezuelan president. They quote President Trump saying, "A lot of good planning and a lot of great troops and great people," he said. He said it was a brilliant operation, actually. The Times asked him if he had sought congressional authority for the operation or what is next for Venezuela. And when asked that question, the president said he would address those matters during a news conference to take place at Mar-a-Lago this morning, his private club there in Florida. The president announcing earlier that would take place at roughly 11 a.m. Eastern time. We should also tell you that Venezuela's vice president there has spoken on state-run television after the president's post this morning saying that Nicolas Maduro's location was unknown and that she was asking President Trump for proof of life. Again, it raises real questions about the governance of that country in this time with what the president describes as a massive armada of 15,000 American troops, forces off the coast of that country. I want to bring in now the NBC News military analyst, the Colonel Steve Warren, who is joining us this morning. Colonel Warren, Happy New Year. We are off to the races as we begin this new year again. The president wasting no time at the start of the year in his pressure campaign against Nicolas Maduro, ultimately, as he said this morning, capturing him and his wife, taking them out of the country. Unclear if this was a negotiated exit, but as the Republican Senator Mike Lee said, the strikes that we saw early this morning were done in effect to protect the executing of that arrest warrant, the effort by those forces to pick him up. I know you haven't been involved, obviously, in what's taking place there, but give us a sense about how something like this would be conducted, how challenging it is, and what considerations would have gone into place in advance of a dramatic capture operation like this.
Peter, often our more elite, what we call the Tier 1, so this is our most elite special forces, often our Tier 1 special forces will operate in conjunction with many other agencies throughout the government, whether it's the CIA, as we may likely have seen in that initial potential ground strike, that first ground strike we saw several days ago, or often law enforcement agencies. It is not uncommon for the Tier 1 special operators to work with law enforcement agencies, particularly, we did this, I think, fairly regularly during the Iraq-Afghanistan conflict. So our special forces operations and our more elite law enforcement operators are familiar with working with each other. Now, as far as how an operation like this comes together, it's an extraordinary and complicated thing to do, and real praise to our soldiers and sailors and law enforcement officials who were able to pull this off. So far, we haven't received any reports of U.S. casualties, which is an extraordinary thing, and we're really proud of our men and women who executed it. But it takes there's sort of several layers, and Courtney Kube referenced it a little bit just moments ago. Initially, you have to ensure that you have the ability to get our aircraft into the target area without being shot down. So we have to execute what we call the suppression of enemy air defenses. So that could be some of the early explosions that we saw, as Courtney mentioned. As our correspondent Courtney Kube mentioned, possibly the use of Tomahawks or other remote capabilities to damage or destroy air defense radars and air defense launchers, right? So that's the initial execution. The next thing we like to try and do is isolate. So once we've suppressed air defense, we then try to isolate the target area. In this case, apparently we somehow knew where Nicolas Maduro and his wife were. It's unclear whether that was because we had spoken with them. We don't know how we knew this, but somehow we knew where Maduro may well have been, and we isolated that area. That can be done, again, through remote capabilities, or it could be done with actual troops on the ground to provide what we call security.
To Venezuela, but we need more. We need more security. The people is not going to be safe until the people that has the power, the narco-terrorism in Venezuela, have the power. So Maduro is not the only one. They need to take more of them. We need people inside Venezuela to take charge of it. Let people, good people that could, bring the freedom that we need in order for the Venezuelans to go back. So don't worry, Venezuelans. You don't have to walk back tomorrow, but we are going to go back to Venezuela soon.
I mean, we're hearing that U.S. officials confirm that Maduro has been captured and he's on his way to the U.S. Just hearing that, how does that feel?
Oh my God, it's like a miracle. We were waiting for the real news, and when we saw the TikTok from the President Trump, we said that's right. That it is right. It is the freedom. It is the beginning of the end. So we were waiting for tonight. I mean, this morning at 11, he's gonna talk from Mar-a-Lago, so we are waiting for that moment to know what's going to happen again. So the next steps that's going to take.
You were telling me how you're in touch with your family and friends in Venezuela. What are those conversations like? How are they feeling? What's the mood there?
They are with the expectation that's going to happen. Everything is inside home, taking care, praying, taking everything so slow because they are, captured. So until we know what's going to happen.
Venezuelans right now live in a big fear. So they are happy, but they are with fear. They cannot express themselves, go out to the streets and celebrate because they can be killed.
What's an ideal situation? What do you hope happens in the next day, hour, few days?
We need more intervention with the United States, for sure. We need people from outside to help people inside, good people inside that can do what is needed to do, and also bring the real president of Venezuela, Edmundo, to the country.
Did you ever doubt that this was going to happen, or were you always kind of confident and hopeful?
I trust in President Trump. I knew that all that movement in the Caribbean was not for free.
I mean, you brought up President Trump. Just politics-wise, it's been a whirlwind of craziness going on in the past year. Especially we saw the elections here in Miami. What does this mean, just politics-wise, for Doral, for Miami?
I think it's a strategy. It's just a strategy. That's all the politics are involved. It's a strategy to do the real job that is needed to do.
Just what are your next few hours look like? Are you guys going to stay here, celebrate?
Of course. We want to stay here. We want to live this moment. I think it's going to be history for every Venezuelan. and for every American also, to be here and to know that, the feeling, unless you are here, you cannot feel what it's going, to the feeling of the freedom. That's the main, the most wonderful and the best of all.
And just looking around, people from all ages, from every country here, how does that feel for you guys?
I think that they have to have hope. Nicaragua, Cuba, they have to trust that we are in the best moment of the history with this president, and it's going to be also freedom for all those countries around us. So you have to keep praying and trusting in President Trump.
Thank you guys so much for speaking to us this morning. Well, you heard it there. A lot of excitement coming in from Doral. Just take a look behind me. People are celebrating, singing along, playing music, primarily from Venezuelan singers, from what I noticed. They also were singing a YMCA, very popular song, of course, here in America. But of course, a lot of excitement here in Doral. We'll of course keep you updated as we continue to learn new details coming in from Maduro's capture. And of course, you can stay with us here on NBC6 to keep you updated with the latest. But for now, we're live in Doral. Christian Colon, NBC6 News. Thank you.
Whether it was tomahawks or airstrikes or a combination of both, there was suppressive fire used to protect U.S. personnel during this extraction operation. Now, as you talked earlier about, this may be the easy part. Of course, it's not easy. Only a few countries in the world, perhaps only the United States, has this kind of capability. But now, who is going to run the country? Was this President Trump's perhaps greatest military accomplishment in a bloodless regime change operation against an illegitimate dictator who ran a mafia state? If there's a successful, quick democratic transition and the legitimate opposition, which won the last elections, which were then stolen from them, if they are able to come into power, work out a working relationship with the existing Venezuelan military, then this will be a great success. If, however, the military divides, a new strong man who is potentially anti-United States emerges in power, the country descends into civil war, then this will be perhaps President Trump's greatest failure. He clearly is hoping for the latter, and I know a lot of back-channel negotiations have been involved in this. I've been talking to some of the negotiators who were working with Trump administration officials. And there are many Trump administration officials who have interests here. President Trump's interest, as he's made clear, was always the drugs, to stop the drug trade, and he's interested in Venezuela's oil. He's made that clear. Venezuela has enormous oil reserves. And he was critical when the United States went into Iraq that the United States didn't take the oil. Marco Rubio himself, coming up in Latin American politics, anti-Cuban platform, has an interest in regime change in Venezuela, which he hopes will then weaken an alliance of states that are anti-American in Latin America, including Cuba and Venezuela being the largest. You mentioned Miller, who has an immigration agenda, would want fewer migrants coming out of Venezuela, potentially Venezuela the sea is becoming a place where migrants can go. So this is a new day for Latin America.
Right.
And the U.S. military carried an operation. We're going to hear a lot about it, how successful it was, but this is a new day for the U.S. relations in Latin America, with President Trump asserting dominance and doing a snatch and grab operation. Will this encourage other leaders around the world to do the same with their enemies, and will it make the United States, which in theory, defends democracy and human rights seem hypocritical.
You've been listening to Richard Engel, our chief foreign correspondent. Richard, you were talking with me about the oil reserves in Venezuela. Their reserves, number one, the largest in the world, believed to be roughly 300 billion barrels by some assessments, accounting for approaching 20% of the global supply there in Venezuela. You'll remember after the U.S. recently seized one of the sanctioned oil tankers, as the White House described it, the president said that it was his belief that the U.S. would then seize that oil, would keep that oil. That tanker was then routed to the United States, specifically to Texas. Keir Simmons is our chief international correspondent. He's been watching this developing news with us as well. And Keir, quickly to you, I want to share a statement from the Russian Foreign Ministry. Vladimir Putin's the Kremlin now reacting to this, saying that the United States committed, in its words, an act of armed aggression against Venezuela that it said was both deeply concerning and condemnable. That is notable because while on the one hand, the U.S. has been focused heavily in this region on Venezuela, the president and his team simultaneously have been focused on trying to bring about an end to the war between Russia and Ukraine. Vladimir Putin, for a variety of reasons over the course of many months, has been disinclined, it appears, to resolve the situation there. We have heard from Volodymyr Zelensky, who has also been very reluctant to give up land in that country. But this does infuse a new wrinkle into another global hotspot, which is Russia as well.
Yeah, I've been reading that statement too, Peter, and I've been reflecting that this is why Richard Engel describes this as such a significant moment, is that what you have overnight is the U.S. striking a Russian partner. Maduro was, a de facto ally of President Putin, and President Trump has just taken him out. So you have that aspect. And on the other hand, you have President Putin now offering his diplomacy, if you like, to try to stabilize the situation. Effectively, you have President Putin saying, okay, we have a problem in your region, Mr. Trump, let me help you to solve that. Sounds familiar, and it is therefore significant because it gives the Russians the ability to kind of say, well, look, you see, this happens everywhere, and we help each other to solve it. So you can see how there are multiple dimensions to this, and the implications and the impact of it we will only know in the months ahead. But there's another aspect to this too, Peter, and I think it's really fascinating, and people will be talking about this again as we look ahead, is that what you have here is very familiar, which is the U.S. intervening in another country to potentially bring about, you might even say, and the Trump administration isn't saying this clearly, and there's a reason why perhaps they're not quite saying it this way, but maybe even to try and bring about democracy, but certainly intervening. And that is something that we have seen before from the U.S., and Richard has been very carefully navigating those questions over whether it really works, and there is plenty of history to suggest that it does not, and then there are some examples of moments when it has made a difference. And all of this is happening while there are protests in Iran, effectively looking to overthrow the regime there, and those protests are the most significant since some years ago, the uprising over the killing of a young woman in Iran. So there, too, there is a threat to that regime. And, of course, Iran is a close partner to Venezuela. So this is, there are moving parts here, and there is no doubt of this significance.
You're right here. In the president's victory speech upon winning the last election, he said, I'm not going to start wars. I'm going to stop wars. We're now hearing some of the criticism coming in from some of the president's political opponents. Among them, we're hearing from one of the top national security officials who served beneath President Obama during his time in office. That's Ben Rhodes, who says, in simple terms, he says, a regime change war in Latin America based on absurd rationales about drug trafficking, no explanation of goals, and counter to everything Trump promised, campaigning, and we're not even a full year into Trump's term, and see what the domestic criticism will be of the actions taking place. Richard Engel, quickly to you. There are still, even as we watch what appears to be a successful capture operation, there is still a lot of potential complications in the days and weeks ahead.
Huge complications. Doing a successful military extraction, like a successful counterterrorism strike, is something that President Trump will talk about. He will praise the bravery of the soldiers. He will talk about how it was carried out with great expertise and precision and coordination, and it seems that it was. But who will govern the country? How will it run? Will the people accept it? All very open questions. And I wanted to go back for a second to ask.
This is an NBC News special report. Here's Peter Alexander.
Good morning to you. I'm Peter Alexander here in New York. Again, we are covering these new developments from early this morning. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro in U.S. custody after what was a dramatic and daring early morning attack by U.S. forces, the U.S. military there. The Attorney General, Pam Bondi, saying that Maduro and his wife will, quote, soon face the full wrath of American justice on American soil in American courts. Maduro and other Venezuelan officials were indicted in 2020 on narco-terrorism charges. We have spoken to a federal law enforcement official who confirms that Bondi referred to a new indictment today specific to the new charges that both Maduro and his wife are facing. Again, as if you are just joining us now, getting new information as we speak, we are looking at the early morning military strikes, what was described as acts of aggression by the remaining portions of the now decapitated Venezuelan Maduro regime. Those strikes beginning roughly between 1 and 2 o'clock Eastern time. They are an hour ahead of the East Coast in Venezuela. The president formally making the announcement at roughly 4:21 this morning, and he has spoken out since. We expect to hear from the president again at about 11 o'clock Eastern time, roughly a half an hour from now, where he is scheduled, according to his own post on Truth Social, to address the country, to speak to reporters in the room, as well with an update on the entire situation. The president, a short time ago, speaking to Fox News, said that he watched every aspect of this operation from Mar-a-Lago. He said that the U.S. has been planning carrying this out for a matter of days. Multiple officials tell NBC News sources familiar with the planning of this operation say the president had given his approval for it before Christmas. Ultimately, it was now that it took place because, in the words of the president, there had been bad weather that had delayed previous discussions or efforts to pursue it before this day. Notably, no American forces on the ground, to the best of our knowledge at this point, according to the administration, according to the president himself, have been harmed. He did say, in his words, a couple of guys in a helicopter were hit, but they came back, in the president's words, in pretty good shape. There had been questions about whether this was a negotiated exit that took place, but the president says, while he did speak to Maduro about a week ago, that was information publicly we had not known previous to his acknowledging it. He says when the forces arrived there and captured Maduro, that he was in a house that the president said was more like a fortress, and that when he was captured, he was trying to get to a fortified location, in the president's words, before American forces, quote, bum rushed him. That's the latest on the information we're hearing from the president. My colleague, our chief international correspondent, is Keir Simmons. He is in Washington, D.C. with the very latest. He's been monitoring the situation with us over the course of several hours. Keir, there are a lot of questions right now. Among them, Nicolas Maduro's whereabouts. The president saying that he is on a ship off the coast of Venezuela, the Iwo Jima, expected to come to the United States soon, where he would face those criminal charges. Among the other questions, frankly, are what happens next in Venezuela, where Venezuelans really over the course of the last several hours have now been waking up to this new dawn, a new day there. Will this be the continuation, though under the leadership of somebody else, of a sort of Maduro-type authoritarian regime, or will some of the more democratic aligned forces be able to take control of that country? Keir?
Yeah, Peter, let's just say this may turn out to be the most significant U.S. intervention in the Western Hemisphere among its neighbors since the 1980s. As you describe it, President Trump talking about really a dramatic operation, talking about bursting through steel doors in order to get to Maduro and his wife and take him out of Venezuela. It is stunning. It is also in many ways not surprising, given the build-up of U.S. forces around Venezuela that we have seen and the threats, frankly, that have been made by President Trump himself and the Trump administration to President Maduro if he did not leave office, if he did not relinquish power. Now, President Trump answering that question in an interview on Fox News earlier today about what happens next, saying he expects the US to get very strongly involved in the future of Venezuela's oil industry, and asked who will lead Venezuela, saying we're going to have a look at that right now. I mean, Peter, that will prompt criticism because many of the questions this morning will be about what is the strategy here, what is the plan beyond removing President Maduro from power, effectively regime change. The Maduro regime, other members of the regime, Vice President, for example, are saying that the Trump administration has only partially achieved its goals, that Venezuela is stable. We haven't heard from the Venezuelan opposition at this stage, the legitimate government, frankly, who won an election but were not able to take power. What has happened with the opposition? Will the opposition at some stage be moved into power? All of these things are questions just hours since this strike and this operation, and questions that governments around the world will be asking. U.S. allies and partners around the world releasing cautious messages. Just one example, the European Union saying, Kaja Kallas, one of the leaders of the European Union, saying they have repeatedly said Maduro lacks legitimacy, but at the same time calling for restraint. And Peter, I'm sure we'll get into this, but denunciation and condemnation from US adversaries around the world, countries that are allied with, partnered with Venezuela and with the Maduro regime, Cuba denouncing it, Colombia expressing deep concern, condemnation from Iran, Russia calling it armed aggression against Venezuela, and saying that it is concerning and condemnable. No news yet from China, a crucial player in all of this. A Chinese delegation met with Maduro just days ago, and now this.
Here, as we again update those waking up with us right now or monitoring the situation taking place overseas, it's notable that just shy of a year in office in his second term, this now marks just the latest in what has become a long string of foreign strikes or foreign engagements by the President of the United States. He targeted with massive strikes Iran's nuclear sites. We have been covering over the course of this holiday period strikes taking place in Nigeria, other strikes having taken place in Yemen, in Syria, in Iraq on those alleged drug boats in the Pacific and the Caribbean as well. This does raise a lot of questions right now from some of the president's critics about under what authorities he's acting right now, having not sought the authority of Congress. And just to sort of detail some of the contours of the criticism we're now hearing right now, and I think this is where a lot of the conversation, at least domestically, is going to turn, even as there are a lot of things to learn internationally about the situation, comes from one of the Democratic critics of this. It's the Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, who says that the military operation that led to the capture of Maduro today is, in his words, a sickening return to a day when the U.S. asserted the right to dominate the internal political affairs of all nations in the Western Hemisphere. So you're getting a better understanding of what the criticism may look like. We did, however, hear also from the President of the United States that he is pursuing this through legal channels as well. The Attorney General Pam Bondi speaking out. First, the President revealing that it was the Iwo Jima ship in the Caribbean where Nicolas Maduro and his wife had initially been taken. Our expectation, according to the president, is that they will then be taken to the United States, expected to arrive in New York for whatever the proceedings will look like in terms of the criminal justice process taking place here. The president also said that there was a lot of good planning, a lot of great troops, he said, great people. It was a brilliant operation. Actually, among the questions that are outstanding right now, one about the fork in the road, what happens next in Venezuela. I think that one, of course, is crucial. And separately, as it relates to oil, which is in many ways at the heart of the economy of Venezuela, for all the focus on drug trafficking with 300 billion barrels, Venezuela is number one in the world in terms of the oil reserves it's had. And Keir, as you and I both have been reporting out, the president, after U.S. forces, Coast Guard forces, first seized that sanctioned oil tanker. They brought it back to the U.S., where the president himself said the U.S. would, in effect, be taking the oil as well. So I think a lot of attention, obviously, I think you would agree, is on what happens next in terms of the oil in that country, no?
Oh, no question. We should say that the Venezuelan oil industry has so lacked investment over years that, frankly, it is a long way from being able to just ramp up, if you like, and send that kind of oil into the international markets. I think another question to add to your very good and insightful questions there, Peter, is about how does President Trump's base react to this? A president who was elected saying he would start no new wars, and who has managed to agree peace deals around the world, as you mentioned, at the same time, striking countries around the world. There is an interesting aspect to this, and I think it underscores how complex these things can be. As I've mentioned, Venezuela is a close partner to Russia. Maduro and Putin have been close. What does this mean for Russia? Does this put pressure on President Putin that might actually potentially somewhere down the line make it more likely that he does a deal over Ukraine? I mean, these are complex matters, and I think it really just points to the fact that we really are in uncharted territory. We just don't know at this stage what happens in the coming days in Venezuela, in the coming weeks, or even in the coming months, and the reaction of governments around the world, and the reaction domestically, politically, and from President Trump's base will depend on the events that we see play out in the coming period.
Keir Simmons, all good points. Stay with us for a second. I want to bring into this conversation our NBC News military analyst. That's Colonel Steve Warren. And Colonel Warren, I appreciate your having woken up early with us as we've been covering this developing story now over the course of approaching 7 hours. Want to get some details from you, if you can, about the dangers, the risks associated with that, what was in effect a raid that took place today. Not so much a kill operation, clearly, like one where they pursued Osama bin Laden in 2011. American forces did. This one a capture operation that comes with its own challenges. Talk to us about the risks, the challenges, and what complications you say that you see that may still lie ahead.
Yeah, right. So U.S. forces appear at this point to have conducted really very much of a textbook raid. The president told us, or the president has said, that no Americans were killed. Some may have been injured or wounded, and apparently some damage to one of the helicopters that was involved. What we don't know yet is if any Venezuelan civilians were harmed or killed, or any Venezuelan forces were harmed or killed. So there's still some questions out there. An operation like this involves several phases. First, there is the suppression of the Venezuelan air defense capability, and I think that is probably what some of the explosions that we're seeing may well have been. The next phase is to, and this is where it becomes much more dangerous, is to isolate the objective. And President Trump has now said that it was a house, some sort of bunker-style house. So to isolate that objective, that means to cut off all of the roads that responding forces could use to come in and interfere with our operation. The last phase, of course, is what we would call actions on the objective. That's the actual U.S. forces on the ground, physically taking control of, in this case, Maduro and his wife, and moving them out to the helicopters. Also very dangerous. This is when close-in bodyguards have the opportunity to fight. This may be when other forces that are in the very local area have the opportunity to respond, maybe that weren't cut off from the roads or weren't suppressed from the explosions. So there are a lot of risks here. And then once everyone is back on the helicopters, Of course, we have to exfiltrate all of these forces, all of these helicopters, and there remains the opportunity for anyone with so much as a machine gun to fire at these helicopters, to potentially shoulder-fired air defense capabilities like a Stinger, or even more advanced air defense capabilities. So a tremendously complicated operation, appears to be almost perfectly executed. So congratulations to U.S. forces for a job well done.
Colonel Steve Warren is an NBC News military analyst. Colonel, we appreciate your expertise, and you're joining us again right now. We should note the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, according to Republican Senator of Utah, Mike Lee, said that the U.S. strikes that took place on the ground in Venezuela in the early morning hours today were done to protect and defend those executing the arrest warrant for Nicolas Maduro and his wife there. So any expectation that we might learn this was a negotiated exit in some form after the president said he and Maduro had spoken about a week ago. It appears clear that was not the case at this time. There's also a variety of reports that we're seeing from on the ground in that region of fires taking place at Venezuela's largest military complex, some of the explosions taking place there. Perhaps those were done to sort of protect those forces going in, to target some of the potential defenses that exist in Venezuela as well. Obviously, this has ripple effects, not just there, but around the region and, frankly, here in the United States for a variety of Venezuelan communities and other Americans. I want to get right to Jesse Kirsch. He is in Doral, Florida. There is a large Venezuelan expat population there. Jesse, we checked in with you earlier. It's getting louder there. You can hear the celebrations growing. The Venezuelan community that has been calling for the departure of Nicolas Maduro for more than 13 years now celebrating his exit.
And just moments ago, Peter, this crowd behind me chanting in Spanish, he has fallen down just hours after President Trump said that Nicolas Maduro had been captured by the U.S. And now the president says that Maduro will be heading to U.S. soil, where the Attorney General says he will face American justice. Really just a remarkable turn of events being celebrated here with smiles, with cheers, with tears in some people's eyes. Apparently earlier, well before 9 in the morning, we had at least one person popping a bottle of champagne. The music has been blasting. There have been engines revving. And just to give you an idea, we're gathered at a gas station in Doral, Florida, just outside of Miami. This is affectionately known as Doralzuela, known for its Venezuelan American community, its Venezuelan national expat community. And speaking with people here who have been separated largely from family for years because of the diplomatic situation and the travel challenges that come with that. One man telling me he's had to go to Europe to meet up with his grandmother, who is still in Venezuela, a young woman, a Venezuelan woman whose mother, she says, is a U.S. green card holder here. She says she lives here, but her father, for the last 3 years almost, has been in Venezuela, so she hasn't seen him. So those kinds of divides between loved ones potentially are going to come to an end in the weeks and months ahead. I think that would be the hope for many of the people here. Just speaking to the pride that we're seeing from people, they've been singing the Venezuelan national anthem. They've also been singing the American national anthem, the Star Spangled Banner. There are both Venezuelan flags and American flags here, you can see. And also, very visibly, very clearly, a crowd, at least elements of it, visibly, vocally supporting President Trump. And you think about what has unfolded in this administration. There are as many as 600,000 Venezuelan nationals who the administration has worked to take temporary protected status away from. But yet you can see a very supportive and celebratory crowd here, including people with hats supportive of President Trump, just speaking to what this moment means and what his administration has done for these people. And just another sign speaking to visible support for the president himself. We've heard the crowd also dancing and singing along to the YMCA. Of course, we know that to be a song the president often has featured at his rallies. But again, this is the scene here. It has pretty much been like this for hours, Peter. Some people told us they were here as early as 2 in the morning. The crowd has swelled, gotten smaller. It is definitely growing once again. A party atmosphere here just outside of Miami. And one other point to note, Peter, we just spoke a moment ago with a couple say they are Cubans, not Venezuelans, Cubans here in solidarity with the Venezuelan people, also speaking to the fact that they hope that Cuba could be next. So that just speaks to broader implications in the region, of course, and also right here in the Miami area, where there is, of course, a very massive, decades-old Cuban community as well, Peter.
Jesse Kirsch with those dramatic and colorful pictures there from Doral, Florida. Frankly, not too far away from Mar-a-Lago, where the president's expected to speak within the next 15 minutes or so. Of course, we will keep you posted. We will bring that to you live as soon as it begins. We're anticipating the president's remarks again, as he has announced at the top of this hour. I want to bring to this conversation our our former chief White House colleague and friend of mine, now moderator of Meet the Press, Kristen Welker, who is joining us in Washington as well. Kristen, there is a lot to make sense of at this time, and I think we're going to have a lot of time to do it, but we're still in an evolving and developing situation right now. A lot of what we're seeing on the ground has echoes of what's happened in 1990. Frankly, it was this day, January 3rd of 1990, 36 years ago, where the U.S. then captured, effectively, Manuel Noriega, the Panamanian president there. He surrendered at that time before he was prosecuted on U.S. soil and convicted here. Now, the president who came to power, you'll remember saying, among other things, that his focus would be on immigration and the economy, saying, I am not going to start wars, I'm going to stop wars, engaged again with another escalation, now punctuated by the capture of Nicolas Maduro and his wife. It really does set the table for what is a dramatic year ahead for this president, leading up to the midterms, where Americans will again have their chance to express their views.
Peter, I think that context is so important. Let's just remember exactly what President Trump said on the day of his inauguration. He said, we will measure our success not only by the battles we win, but also by the wars that we end. And perhaps most importantly, the wars we never get into. This was so fundamental to his campaign promise that he was going to extract America from foreign wars, that he wanted an America first foreign policy. And so his base, and we're still waiting for reaction from a lot of folks within his base, will undoubtedly look at this with some skepticism. Ro Khanna, who's a Democrat, of course, a Democratic congressman, saying Donald Trump betrayed his MAGA base today. Right now, Peter, we are seeing the reaction pour in largely along party lines. Democrats accusing the president of waging an illegal war. Senator Ruben Gallego of Arizona calling this the second unjustified war in my lifetime. This war is illegal. He says it's embarrassing that we went from the world cop to the world bully in less than a year. Senator Andy Kim also very critical. Republican Congressman Thomas Massie also critical. He says if this action were constitutionally sound, the attorney general wouldn't be tweeting that they've arrested the president of a sovereign country and his wife for possessing guns in violation of a 1934 U.S. firearm law. Having said that, Peter, Republican leadership, the president's Republican allies standing firmly beside him. Senate Majority Leader John Thune posting that he believes this was the right move, as well as House Speaker Mike Johnson. Senator Tom Cotton defending what he believes is the legality of this move as well. So again, I think one of the big questions will be, what does the MAGA base have to say about all of this? We're trying to track what's being said on Steve Bannon's podcast, of course, a former official under the first Trump administration. They had a break, but have repaired that. So far, Peter, the conversation there has been largely supportive. But again, as you note, Peter, everyone is just beginning to process these extraordinary sets of events out of Venezuela.
We're going to be watching these extraordinary sets of events as you describe them, the dramatic developments that continue to develop here, frankly, because in that country right now, they're only a matter of hours after the capture of Nicolas Maduro, the president of that country for 13 years. He succeeded Hugo Chavez, another authoritarian leader there. And frankly, there are a lot of real questions about how the Venezuelan people will react, how the remaining members of the now decapitated regime will react, and what fork in the road Venezuela chooses, whether it pursues a path not too dissimilar from that was governed by Nicolas Maduro, or something a bit more democratic oriented, what that opposition would look like going forward here. Kristen, I do want to stick with you on a point that you made that I think is interesting, and it relates to the conversations that are being had domestically already. And it's the view of the president within the MAGA universe right now. While widely he is being praised by Republican lawmakers in reaction to the early details we're learning about the strikes that took place and the seizure, the capture of Nicolas Maduro overnight, there is certainly within the Republican Party Authority a lot of concern about these foreign entanglements, as some describe them, why the president has focused so much attention on some of these efforts, what the authorities are under which he is doing this. Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is soon departing her seat as a House member, who was so close to the president for so long, had made very clear that she did not support efforts like what was taking place in Venezuela, and that was long before what we witnessed happening overnight.
Well, absolutely, Peter. And we're starting to see these fractures take place within the MAGA base. You mentioned Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's been at the forefront of that fracture, criticizing the president for being so focused on these foreign entanglements, saying that this is not what her constituents voted for. That, as you said earlier, Peter, their top issue is the economy, issues like health care. She wants her party to have a health care plan and to be focused on those types of pocketbook issues. But you have other Republicans, Peter, who have questioned the legality of these actions that we're seeing unfold in Venezuela. Senator Rand Paul, for example, has been at the forefront of saying that President Trump needs to come to Congress before he takes any more actions. Of course, we've seen over the past several months these strikes against suspected drug boats, seizing oil tankers. You do have Democrats, but again, some Republicans questioning the legality of those actions. It's also worth noting Chief of Staff Susie Wiles told Vanity Fair she believes President Trump would need congressional approval before he took any broad action within Venezuela. Does this fall within that category? Those are the sorts of debates that will unfold, Peter.
Kristen Welker is moderator of Meet the Press. You have a full plate as you get started in this new year. We'll look forward to seeing more of your coverage throughout this day and obviously tomorrow on Meet the Press. Kristen, thank you. I'll ask you to stay with us as well. I want to bring in now our senior legal correspondent, my colleague on Saturday Today, Laura Jarrett, who's been speaking to sources over the course of this morning. And again, Laura, I want to talk a bit about the prosecution, the case against Nicolas Maduro at this time. We can first start with what the president has told us publicly, what we've heard from the attorney general. The president saying that Maduro right now is on a U.S. ship, the Iwo Jima, which is in effect parked off the coast of Venezuela. The president says he will be coming to New York. We expect that to happen within a matter of hours, as early as today. Attorney General Bondi also posting publicly about a new indictment. The first against Maduro and 14 of his allies was back in 2020. There is a new one today. Tell us about those charges and what you're anticipating in the hours and days ahead.
Yeah, now that indictment has been unsealed, Peter, we're getting a much better sense of just the seriousness of what Maduro is now facing. A number of narcotics charges, weapons charges, conspiracy-related charges against the president, as well as his wife, and a number of others here, Peter. At first glance here, it looks very similar to what we saw in the indictment just a number of years ago. But here, prosecutors actually spelling out the accusations against President Maduro, saying that he essentially facilitated diplomatic passports to drug traffickers to make it easier for them essentially to get across borders and to move their drug proceeds from Mexico to Venezuela. Also accusing Maduro in this indictment, Peter, of facilitating the movement of private planes under diplomatic cover, again, to ensure that the flights received no scrutiny from law enforcement or the military. Now, Peter, there's a number of different ways in these types of cases involving narco-terrorism where you could say, okay, who has jurisdiction for a case like this in the United States over a citizen, obviously, of another sovereign country? Here, the way they appear to be doing it, Peter, is by saying that Maduro will be first brought and arrested in the Southern District of New York. And so that's the way that essentially federal prosecutors here in New York are reaching out to grab him. What is highly unusual here, Peter, is that he didn't surrender, as in the Noriega case. It wasn't as if he said, okay, fine, I'll agree to turn myself over. They went and got him. And because this is typically done where you see law enforcement, facilitating a transfer like this after somebody has agreed to turn themselves over, or their government has agreed to turn themselves over, this is distinct. And so I can imagine a situation in which a defense attorney is going to raise at least some issue with how the military and law enforcement went about this. We're going to learn a lot more details in the weeks and months to come about how all of this was executed. But you see the Attorney General talking early this morning about how this was carried out, saying, a huge thanks to our brave military who conducted this incredible and highly successful mission. Again, the blurring of military and law enforcement highly unusual here. And while the Noriega case, of course, has some shades of similarities, there appear to be some distinct differences here, which I imagine, again, will be exploited in the days and weeks to come. But the first step here will be for him to be presented in New York, and then obviously getting a defense attorney and off to the races then, Peter.
Again, your reference to the former Panamanian president, Manuel Noriega, notably he surrendered on this day 36 years ago, gives us a bit of a template as we try to get a better understanding of the circumstances happening here. You were talking, Laura, about Pam Bondi, the attorney general, who posted earlier that soon, she said he will soon, about Nicolas Maduro, face the full wrath of American justice. I recognize that it's a bit premature. We don't know all the details about this, but is there any understanding of, we know he's being held on a USS Iwo Jima, a ship that is off the coast of Venezuela right now, where you put someone like Nicolas Maduro when they come to the United States?
Yeah, that's going to be another issue. Where exactly do they hold him? You can't imagine that he's just going to be in a regular cell in the Southern District of New York. Obviously, there's security concerns. There is no natural corollary in history for how this is done. How long he stays on that ship, an open question mark. Typically, there's private transfers that can be arranged in a situation like this to get him to New York, but we still don't know exactly when that will happen. And then again, once he gets here, where does he stay to keep him safe, Peter?
Yeah, we'll be watching that. I mean, it's conceivable that at the end of this day, Nicolas Maduro, who woke up, frankly, facing the barrel of a gun from U.S. forces this morning in Caracas, Venezuela, ends his night in New York City as he prepares to face charges here, as that indictment has now been shared publicly. Laura Jarrett, our senior legal correspondent. Laura, thank you. I want to bring in now our White House correspondent, Monica Alba, who's there in Washington, D.C. Monica, you and I have been speaking back and forth over the course of this morning. Let's just take a moment at 11 o'clock and sort of reset the scene here about these dramatic developments that we've been witnessing. The president at roughly 4:20 this morning making the announcement, Americans waking up to the news that the U.S. was conducting strikes on the ground in and around Caracas, Venezuela, that country's capital city. And not only that, but that the U.S., as the president said, had captured and flown out of the country both Nicolas Maduro and his wife, an operation that he said was done in conjunction with U.S. law enforcement. The operation, he said he would detail further at 11 o'clock. It is now 11 o'clock on the East Coast. We have a team on the ground at Mar-a-Lago. As soon as the president begins his remarks, we will take you there. But Monica, as we've discussed, this really marks a stunning and dramatic culmination of months that have built to this moment. The president's desire to oust Nicolas Maduro, to end drug trafficking from that country to the United States, and ultimately it ended on the pre-dawn hours in the early days of this year with U.S. forces raiding one of the properties where Maduro had been hiding and bringing him back, in effect, to U.S. soil.
Extraordinary developments overnight, Peter. That's right. And this is something that U.S. officials confirmed to us. The president had been weighing for days. He first approved a plan to potentially do this before Christmas, more than a week ago. Of course, publicly, the president had been hinting at some potential action on land in Venezuela for a very long time. It was unclear exactly in what form that would take. Then there were a couple of days where there were questions about when that would happen, certainly with the president himself announcing just in recent days that there had been an apparent strike on a drug facility on the shore of Venezuela, not necessarily in the heart of a city or in Caracas like what we saw overnight. That raised a ton of questions about what could come next, whether that was an isolated incident, whether there were going to be more similar strikes on land. And we know, according to the president himself, who spoke earlier today, that he planned, he said, to potentially carry this out 4 days ago, but the weather was, quote, not perfect. He said essentially that he was going to be monitoring this, but that they needed to have the right window. They needed to have a few more clouds, quote, than we thought. But then once they got the ultimate signal and they waited and they were able to do it, he said all of a sudden it opened up and we said go. Now, the president has been monitoring all of this from his Mar-a-Lago club down in Florida, where we know top administration officials have been coming coming and going over the last couple of weeks, where he has been holding some high-level meetings, certainly with world leaders, but also continuing to approve and order, as we have seen the Department of Defense announce, the continued strikes on these alleged drug boats. We saw that as recently as leading into New Year's Eve on December 30th and 31st. There were several strikes. It wasn't clear whether they were in the Eastern Pacific or whether they were in the Caribbean, as we have sometimes seen them give that exact detail. But they did release some video, and there was a question of some potential survivors that had come from one of those vessels that the Coast Guard had gone out to potentially attempt a search and rescue on, but ultimately abandoned that. So we know this week, certainly, there have been those incremental developments when it comes to this ultimate decision that the president took overnight. But I think it's really important to point out, Peter, some insight that we got from the White House Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles, in that Vanity Fair interview, which was published just in mid-December, where she said that the ultimate goal here of the president was to continue bombing and hitting these alleged drug boats until, quote, Maduro cries uncle. That was her phrasing. And we saw the president, again, speak to this openly, speak to this publicly. But for months, the posture of the Trump administration and the White House was that this was not about regime change per se, was that this was about this so-called war on drugs and on narco terrorists. So this is an incredibly significant development in all of this. And in terms of conversations, Peter, we know that President Trump says he spoke with Nicolas Maduro. He says about a week ago, and we know from earlier reporting and conversations that they had spoken sometime before that. So a really important detail there, the fact that it seems from Nicolas Maduro's own words just a few days ago, he had signaled a willingness and openness in some of his communications to engaging with the United States. But the president said earlier today on Fox News essentially that he argued that Maduro wanted to perhaps make a deal and that he ultimately told him, nope, we are not going to be able to do that kind of negotiating at the end. He said essentially this could have been a very foolish thing if it didn't work out. And ultimately, he said, the president of his conversations with Maduro, nope, we can't do it. What he did with drugs is bad. So I think, Peter, you have set the table perfectly in referencing, and some of our other colleagues have, the president's comments as candidate Donald Trump. It will be fascinating to see how they stack up against what he says today about these foreign involvements, further foreign entanglements in a moment where his own supporters and some of them who have been most outspoken and certainly broken with him in recent weeks and months have argued that the president should stick to his more America first policy instead of getting involved overseas in these continued conflicts. And we saw just over the course of the last couple of weeks examples of that, not just here in Venezuela and South America, but across the world, overseas in the Middle East and beyond. Peter.
A variety of good points there, Monica. I would just punctuate it with another from the president earlier to Fox News today, saying that the U.S. would be, in his words, very involved in the future of Venezuela's oil industry. As we've been reporting here, obviously, the president had ramped up his pressure campaign in recent weeks, focusing on sanctioned oil tankers there, the first one of which was seized by U.S. forces, brought back to Texas, where the president said it was his presumption that the U.S. would in effect seize that oil as well. The president also made note of the fact that others, including China, will still have access. He said, we're going to allow people to have oil. I bring up the topic of China, as we'll be keeping eyes on as well, because notably a special envoy from China was in Caracas meeting with Nicolas Maduro. The most recent pictures we have of Maduro within the last 48 hours or so. And I think that is a backdrop to all of this that we're going to be watching as well. Monica, I'm going to ask you to stay with us for a second. If we can, I'll ask the control room if you can put up a live picture right now. Our teams, there you are. You can see one of the photographers in the room. Our teams are now inside the Mar-a-Lago property, the South Florida estate of President Trump, where he has been spending most of the Christmas and New Year's holiday. Last night was seen in a photograph there with one of his top advisors, Stephen Miller, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, among others who were there. We do expect to hear from the president. Initially, we were told by him that he would be speaking at roughly 11 o'clock, obviously, on the East Coast. That time has come and gone. So we're going to stay with our live developing continuing news coverage in advance of his remarks. But I want to bring in for a second, if I can, our senior Washington correspondent, Hallie Jackson, who is joining us now. Hallie, reporters will be invited into this room as well. Surely the president will have some prepared remarks he'll want to deliver, and then likely to face a lot of questions from a lot of reporters, many of them on behalf of Americans and other lawmakers, asking for better understanding about the rationale behind this, the authorities under which he is operating right now. What are some of the top questions in your view that remain to be answered and that you think we're going to hear hopefully some better understanding of in the next few minutes?
You're right, Peter. A slew of them, as you've been covering now for the better part of just about 8+ hours or so here live on the air. Two of them, I think, relate to what you and Monica were just discussing. To your point about the interplay with China here, to the majority of the oil that Venezuela exports to China, how does that come into play for the president here? What about the squaring of this latest action with his campaign promises of no new wars? But I would say, first and foremost, we've got to get, I think there are still some real questions about the basic nuts and bolts of what exactly has gone down here. What happens to Maduro from here? Who does President Trump want to see lead Venezuela? To your point, he said earlier today that he wanted to see the U.S. have a more vigorous role in the leadership of that country. Is it the opposition leader? Is it the vice president of Venezuela currently, who, by the way, has asked to see proof of life of Maduro? What about the congressional authorities here? Who did you notify, and at what point in the operation after it had already begun? Where does this go more broadly, Peter?
This is CNN Breaking News. This is CNN Breaking News.
Venezuelan flags flying there. There's been an influx of Venezuelan immigrants, some saying up to 700,000 over the last 5 to 10 years, people fleeing Venezuela because of the economic hardships there, because of the lack of human rights in Venezuela. We should remind you that Maduro was accused by the UN of killing up to 5,000 dissidents, imprisoning anybody who did not agree with his political policies, and torturing them as well. So for many people in Venezuela and here in the United States who have sought refuge refuge, who are political refugees. This has been a very important time. You can see there are tears in people's eyes. They have been celebrating on the streets of Miami since these strikes were first announced. We were awoken early this morning, and I have a lot of friends and family in this area, and the phone was just kept ringing, people asking questions. What does this mean for Venezuela? What does this mean for the people of Cuba as well? Again, we can't get too ahead of ourselves right now. The president has just said they've taken out Maduro because he was wanted. He was indicted not once, but now twice, from what the Attorney General Pam Bondi has told us, for being an agent of the cartels, for being, in their words, a narco trafficker. He will stand trial in the U.S. and he will get his day in court, and he will have attorneys provided to him if he can't pay for them, and he will have a say in this. But for right now, he is in U.S. custody. It is unclear who is leading Venezuela at this hour. If indeed it is more members of the Maduro regime, if it is the vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, who has been there, who has been asking the international community for proof of life to make sure Maduro and his wife are still alive. We have heard from Russia and other countries who are supporters of Venezuela, who are allies of Venezuela, saying they condemn the actions that have happened here. The UN as well has come out and said that they did not agree with how this was handled. You can see the explosions, the eruptions. This was the attack earlier this morning in Venezuela, right there in the capital. And then from the moment those missiles launched, at some point within hours, they had the leader of Venezuela in custody. The president has said that Maduro at the end was trying to negotiate, but he was done negotiating. The vice president has come out on X posting that they offered multiple off-ramps to Maduro. Again, they have been in this region for months now, striking those boats they say are carrying drugs from Venezuela to the United States. The threats have been made. There apparently were negotiations up until last week between the president and Maduro. That, according to President Trump. But at this hour, President Trump was done negotiating. I want to bring up moderator of Meet the Press, Kristen Welker, who's joining our special coverage as we await the president. We do want to remind you, at any moment, we're going to watch President Trump come in. Kristen, this is an interesting time in our country's history, but it's also an interesting time for the Trump administration. They are an America First administration. That's what they campaigned on. And now we have a strike in a foreign country, in a country that has been accused of sending drugs by the tons into the United States, but has never attacked our country. And now we have a military operation, and a leader in that country has been taken out by U.S. forces.
Tom, you're absolutely right. And what is so striking is that we have seen cracks begin to form within the MAGA base as President Trump has escalated his pressure campaign against Nicolas Maduro, against the Venezuelan regime. And now, of course, this reaction just pouring in. It's coming in largely along party lines right now, Tom. We should say that. Democrats highly critical, saying that this is illegal without congressional approval. Congressional leaders, Republicans, supportive. But look at this from Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. She, of course, had a very public break with President Trump, in part because of his focus on foreign policy, which she says goes against his America First foreign policy. Here she says Mexican cartels are primarily and overwhelmingly responsible for killing Americans with deadly drugs. If U.S. military action and regime change in Venezuela was really about saving American lives from deadly drugs, then why hasn't the Trump administration taken action against Mexican cartels? And then listen to this part of her post, Tom. She says, this is what many in MAGA thought they voted to end. Boy, were we wrong. As the baby boomers slip away, both in voters and power, the electoral future will be decided for candidates that focus on American economic populism and promising prosperity for Americans only. Really strong words there from Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. And Tom, just to zoom out a little bit, let's remember what President Trump campaigned on, what that America First foreign policy was all about. He campaigned on getting Americans out of foreign wars. That was part of the inaugural address that he delivered when he said that that would be a part of his vision. And so part of why you're seeing these cracks begin to form within the MAGA base is for that very reason. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of those with the loudest voices, saying that her constituents care about the economy, issues like health care, and that this runs counter to those critical promises that were made. So I think questions moving forward, will Congress be briefed? When? Will there need to be congressional approval for any future action? And what, if any, reaction will we get from the rest of the MAGA base, Tom?
Yeah, Kristen, we're about to go to Keir Simmons, but Kristen, I had an opportunity to speak with Maduro years ago. I interviewed him inside of Venezuela, and his belief was that President Trump never wanted him out. It was others around President Trump, people at the time like Senator Rubio, now the Secretary of State, who were the ones sort of whispering in President Trump's ear to get Maduro out. And now this has become a reality, and we know that Senator Rubio is now Secretary of State Rubio, who's been in charge with multiple jobs, including intelligence as well. Talk to me about that relationship and the role that the Secretary of State played in all of this.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. Secretary Rubio has long had his sights on Venezuela, the concerns, the criticism of Nicolas Maduro. And look at what we have seen from this relationship between President Trump and Secretary Rubio. Remember, they were fierce political rivals back on the campaign trail in 2016. Now, of course, brought into the fold in this second Trump administration has become, quite frankly, Tom, one of his most trusted advisors. When you ask President Trump about the future of MAGA, who should take the baton, he talks about the vice president, but he also talks about Secretary Rubio. And I think it really underscores the strength of that relationship, Tom.
Okay, Kristen, stand by for us again. We are waiting for President Trump to walk out at any moment at Mar-a-Lago to take the podium. We're going to bring you those comments live as they happen. We also want to let you know that President Trump has released what we understand is video of Maduro in custody and also some video of the attack. We're going to have those momentarily. As I mentioned earlier, Keir Simmons is part of this coverage as well. Keir, I want to go to you. At the time that the United States has just taken out the leader of Venezuela, they've been trying to negotiate peace between Russia and Ukraine. This incredibly complicates both those negotiations and also it leaves sort of, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a vacuum, but there are questions about who's in charge in Venezuela right now and what role does the U.S. play in that?
Yeah, it's hard to find words, isn't it, Tom? And it's not surprising because we haven't seen an intervention, a U.S. intervention in Latin America like this since the 1980s. We do know, though, of course, Tom, from more recent history that regime change is unpredictable. Once you remove a leader in a country, what happens next, that is in question. And members of Maduro's regime are saying that there is stability and that this didn't work effectively. So there are huge questions. And around the world, America's adversaries and allies will be watching and waiting to see what plays out now. There has been some criticism significantly from the French foreign minister saying this kind of intervention is effectively, he says, it is wrong. I think that's striking in terms of the breaks in international diplomacy that we have seen in 2025. But if leaders around the world, Tom, didn't get the message in 2025, they're getting it now at the beginning of 2026. The Trump administration messaging quite clearly, you must bend to our will. And as you say, questions from many, many countries, not least Russia. President Putin was very close to Maduro. They are allies. What does this mean for Russia? Is this a weakening of Russia? Is this effectively, a strike by the Trump administration against Russia as well as against Venezuela, against Russian interests? Certainly, in the U.S. national security strategy at the end of last year, what we were told is that the US believes the Western Hemisphere is its area, that it wants to assert itself, and it certainly is with this strike overnight. And that assertion is directed at Russia. It's also directed at the Iranians who had a close relationship with the Maduro regime. And there are protests in Iran right now. What will the Iranian leadership be thinking? It's also directed at China. As Peter Alexander said earlier, we saw Chinese officials with Maduro just in the past few days. What message does this send? Because the Chinese were trying to say, this is our friend, don't usurp him. Well, that didn't work.
Keir, I do want to talk to you because you've done a lot of reporting about China's encroachment in this region as well. We can't talk about Venezuela and what's just happened and not talk about the oil reserves there. Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world, in many ways feeding the countries that are not friends to the United States. The president has spoken about the oil that was taken, he says, by Venezuela that was U.S.'s oil from U.S. companies. This is going to complicate matters because it's unclear what happens with the oil production in Venezuela going forward.
Yeah, no question. And the Russians were playing a role in the Venezuelan oil industry as well. We should say, Tom, you can't just switch on the taps in Venezuela with that oil industry. It does have massive reserves, but it doesn't. It's not an industry that just can start working immediately. So the implications for the oil markets may be muted. And obviously, just a counterpoint to that, this kind of destabilization, if you like, can have implications in financial markets. We will see on Monday when that comes about. But you mentioned China. It's an important point. China has been encroaching in South America, in Latin America, particularly with rare earths, rare minerals. That kind of commodities, which are now so important to the world economy, and I think that the U.S. policy in the Western Hemisphere, that's a major point here too. A message again from the United States in the Western Hemisphere to countries around the world. We don't like you intervening in our, in inverted commas, in our region. I mean, this is stunning. In some ways, though, it is not surprising, Tom. It does play into U.S. foreign policy in the region over decades and even over centuries. And I think from that history, what we do know, of course, is that you don't know what happens next.
Right.
And that's what we have to watch for.
Again, we're awaiting the president at any moment. He was supposed to come out at 11 a.m., but again, this is a time when things are very fluid. We are going to bring you his comments as soon as he comes on. Kira, I do want to get back to you. Venezuela now a region in conflict, right? You have a country that has no leader. It's unclear who is in charge right now, if it's the vice president. You have an opposition leader who just won the Nobel Peace Prize, who is being celebrated across the world. Before that, you had another opposition leader, Juan Guaido, that was acknowledged by the United States going back 4 years as the true leader of Venezuela. And then you have the Venezuelan military, right, who is really holding the cards right now. But besides that, you have what is known as a colectivo, essentially neighborhood gangs that Maduro has armed so they stay loyal to him. Essentially, in Venezuela, where there's no work, there is no money, there is no food, he has given these people food, he has given them weapons so they stay loyal to him. So you have the military and you have sort of these neighborhood ragtag gangs that there's been reporting now that they are actually protecting some military installations. To give you an idea of sort of the military prowess, if you will, of Venezuela. It's just not there that they have neighborhood watchmen, if you will, armed with machine guns protecting their military sites. But it all speaks to who's going to be in charge and who's going to take over. And it sounds like President Trump, at least from now, is not pushing for a regime change. Even though he's taken out the leader of the country, he's saying whoever comes next, he hopes is not like Maduro, but he's assuming the vice president is in charge.
Yeah, and President Trump, and I'm sure we will hear it when we hear from President Trump in a moment. President Trump was asked earlier in an interview who will lead Venezuela, and he said, well, we're going to have to look at that right now. That kind of comment will prompt criticism from some that there needs to be a strategy here rather than simply just the tactic of removing Maduro. We have seen pictures, Tom, of civilians on the streets in Venezuela in support of Maduro. And you're right. If you are Venezuelan sitting at home right now, cowering perhaps a little bit, wondering what happens next, and you are against the Maduro regime, you are trying to calculate whether if you walk out onto the streets, you will become a victim. Will you be supported by the U.S.? Will those forces that Maduro built up around him that you so eloquently describe, will they target you? These kinds of things we know because we've seen this kind of thing before. And you have to be careful with comparisons. But if you take, for example, the U.S. experience in Iraq, where, of course, Saddam Hussein was removed, so that was regime change. What the U.S. then faced was a challenge about who should run the country, how the country should be run, and a civil war. Now, you do have to be careful with these comparisons, completely different part of the world, but the principles are familiar. And the question of whether you can change a country, make it more stable, maybe even make it democratic, with kinetic power that doesn't involve boots on the ground is a looming question here. And of course, the US has tried boots on the ground before, and that in the past, in some parts of the world, hasn't worked.
Keir, stand by for us because we now are seeing these images that are stunning that President Trump has posted on social media. This is the former leader of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, in handcuffs. You can see those blacked out sunglasses over his eyes. He is wearing the earmuffs as well. He looks to be in a tracksuit, likely the same outfit they took him in custody, and we don't know that for sure, but it looks like he's been scuffed up there. You can see his hands there given a bottle of water. This is the first image we've seen of the former leader of Venezuela, now in U.S. custody aboard what we believe is the USS Iwo Jima. Again, the president putting out this photo. He will stand trial, it appears, in New York. He was indicted in both the Southern District of Florida and in New York for charges stemming of drug trafficking, being a narco-terrorist, colluding with the cartels, allowing his country to be a meeting point, to be in a shipping point for they said millions of tons. I don't know if that exact figure is correct, of cocaine coming out of Venezuela to the United States and around the world. His wife also taken into custody. And if you're wondering why his wife was also taken into custody, she has held many roles in Venezuela in the political hierarchy, once as attorney general, once as the leader of parliament. Some have said she's as popular as her husband, Nicolás Maduro. So both of them have been taken into custody. Of course, Maduro rising to power after Hugo Chavez was dying of cancer. He was in his third term, 2 of his elections deemed completely illegal by the international community. Even his last election, more Venezuelans voting for the opposition party, and yet he stayed in power as a true dictator in Latin America, building ties with places like Cuba, building ties with Russia and Iran and China, maintaining those relationships throughout. And he simply ran out of time in President Trump's side. We will hear from the president in a matter of moments. Our Richard Engel, our chief foreign correspondent, has been reporting from Latin America, from Colombia, when these strikes started. Richard, you've been watching all this information. You saw that image just posted of Nicolás Maduro. Not exactly the same story, not exactly the same case, but reminiscent of when they took out Saddam Hussein, a similar image. You know, these images are very important to President Trump as well. Again, 2 completely different situations, 2 different military actions, but the visuals are very similar here.
I think they're very similar, and I think it's no surprise. President Trump is a little bit late in coming out to make his remarks. I think it's no accident that that image was released first. This is the image that President Trump wanted to show Venezuelans, wanted to show Americans, wanted to show the world. A dictator who stood up, who refused to accept President Trump's policies, who said no, and who's now in handcuffs with earmuffs on so that he won't know what is being said around him, won't know where he is. A man who went from a palace to now going to a courtroom and potentially a jail cell. A very powerful image, an image that will be seen in Venezuela by the people, but also by the leadership. I've been speaking to people today who've been involved in this negotiation process that has been both diplomatic and a negotiation process by force over the last several months to try to get Maduro to leave on his own. And what we've seen and have been talking about all day is this escalation. First, there were the attacks on boats. Then there was the seizures of the oil tankers. Then a land attack. Then ultimately a snatch and grab operation to take Nicolas Maduro. You were talking about the leadership. Right now, there clearly is a power vacuum. I was speaking with a senior official who was also involved in this negotiation process, this pressure campaign, who said the most important person in Venezuela right now is the Defense Minister Padrino, that he effectively is managing the country as it goes through this transition. We don't know yet if this was a successful regime change that will lead to a democratic future and a better future that could see the opposition leader, who was just awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, take power and a smooth transition, or if this regime change will lead to state collapse and civil war. It was a bold move. It was a successful military operation. The militias are still somewhat on the streets, but this was a dictatorship built around Maduro, around his cult of personality, and without Maduro, the military is much diminished. And that photo is clearly designed to impact people like the Defense Minister Padrino, to say, be careful with your next move. You should make peace with the political party, or you could be the next to get snatched and sent to an American warship and ultimately, most likely, an American prison.
And Richard, it's fair to say from your reporting in the region, you were in Colombia, the president's actions even today have left allies, have left enemies guessing, even confused. I remember speaking to the Colombian president. He came out on social media and said one thing about President Trump, and then you spoke to a defense minister, and they said something completely different.
This President Trump wants the region to be afraid of him. And many White House officials talk about President Trump's unpredictability. And
this was one of the most stunning, effective, and powerful displays of American military might and competence in American history. And if you think about it, we've done some other good ones like the attack on Soleimani, the attack on al-Baghdadi, and the obliteration and decimation of the Iran nuclear sites just recently in an operation known as Midnight Hammer, all perfectly executed and done. No nation in the world could achieve what America achieved yesterday, or frankly, in just a short period of time. All Venezuelan military capacities were rendered powerless as the men and women of our military, working with U.S. law enforcement, successfully captured Maduro in the dead of night. It was dark. The lights of Caracas were largely turned off due to a certain expertise that we have. It was dark and it was deadly. But captured along with his wife, Celia Flores, both of whom now face American men and women of our military who achieved such an extraordinary success overnight with breathtaking speed, power, precision, and competence. You rarely see anything like it. You've seen some raids in this country that didn't go so well. They were an embarrassment. If you look back to Afghanistan, or if you look back to the Jimmy Carter days, they were different days. But captured along with his wife, Celia Flores, both of whom now face American justice. Maduro and Flores have been indicted in the Southern District of New York. It's Jay Clayton, for their campaign of deadly narco-terrorism against the United States and its citizens. I want to thank the men and women of our military who achieved such an extraordinary success overnight with breathtaking speed, power, precision, and competence. You rarely see anything like it. You've seen some raids in this country that didn't go so well. They were an embarrassment. If you look back to Afghanistan, or if you look back to the Jimmy Carter days, they were different days. We're a respected country again, like never before. These highly trained warriors operating in collaboration with U.S. law enforcement caught them in a very ready position. They were waiting for us. They knew we had many ships out in the sea, just sort of waiting. They knew we were coming. So they were in what's called a ready position. But they were completely overwhelmed and very quickly incapacitated. If you would have seen what I saw last night, you would have been very impressed. I'm not sure that you'll ever get to see it, but it was an incredible thing to see. Not a single American service member was killed, and not a single piece of American equipment was lost. We had many helicopters, many planes, many people involved in that fight. But think of that, not one piece of military equipment was lost, not one service member was, more importantly, killed. The United States military is the strongest and most fearsome military on the planet by far. With capabilities and skills our enemies can scarcely begin to imagine. We have the best equipment anywhere in the world. There's no equipment like what we have. And you see that even if you just look at the boats. We've knocked out 97% of the drugs coming in by sea. 90%. Each boat kills on average 25,000 people. We knocked out 97%. And those drugs mostly come from a place called Venezuela. We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. So we don't want to be involved with having somebody else get in, and we have the same situation that we had for the last long period of years. So we are going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. And it has to be judicious because that's what we're all about. We want peace, liberty, and justice for the great people of Venezuela, and that includes many from Venezuela that are now living in the United States and want to go back to their country. It's their homeland. We can't take a chance that somebody else takes over Venezuela that doesn't have the good of the Venezuelan people in mind. We've had decades of that. We're not going to let that happen. We're there now, and what people don't understand, but they understand as I say this, we're there now, but we're going to stay until such time as the proper transition can take place. So we're going to stay until such time as we're going to run it, essentially, until such time as a proper transition can take place. As everyone knows, the oil business in Venezuela has been a bust, a total bust, for a long period of time. They were pumping almost nothing by comparison to what they could have been pumping and what could have taken place. We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country. And we are ready to stage a second and much larger attack if we need to do so. So we were prepared to do a second wave if we needed to do so. We actually assumed that a second wave would be necessary, but now it's probably not. The first wave, if you'd like to call it that, the first attack was so successful, we probably don't have to do a second, but we're prepared to do a second wave, a much bigger wave, actually. This was pinpoint, but we have a much bigger wave that probably won't have to do. This partnership of Venezuela with the United States of America, a country that everybody wants to be involved with because of what we were able to do and accomplish, will make the people of Venezuela rich, independent, and safe. And it will also make the many, many people from Venezuela that are living in the United States extremely happy. They suffered. They suffered. So much was taken from them. They're not going to suffer anymore. The illegitimate dictator Maduro was the kingpin of a vast criminal network responsible for trafficking colossal amounts of deadly and illicit drugs into the United States. As alleged in the indictment, he personally oversaw the vicious cartel known as Cartel de las Solas, which flooded our nation with lethal poison, responsible for the deaths of countless Americans, the many, many Americans. Hundreds of thousands over the years of Americans died because of him. Maduro and his wife will soon face the full might of American justice and stand trial on American soil. Right now, they're on a ship they'll be heading to, ultimately, New York. And then a decision will be made, I assume, between New York and Miami or Florida. But we have people where the overwhelming evidence of their crimes will be presented in a court of law. And I've seen it. I've seen what we have. It's both horrible and breathtaking that something like this could have been allowed to take place. For many years after his term as president of Venezuela expired, Maduro remained in power and waged a ceaseless campaign of violence, terror, and subversion against the United States of America, threatening not only our people, but the stability of the entire region. And you all saw it. In addition to trafficking gigantic amounts of illegal drugs that inflicted untold suffering and human destruction all over the country, all over in particular the United States, Maduro sent savage and murderous gangs, including the bloodthirsty prison gang Tren de Aragua, to terrorize American communities nationwide. And he did indeed. They were in Colorado. They took over apartment complexes. They cut the fingers off people if they called police. They were brutal. But they're not so brutal now. And I just have to congratulate our military, Pete and everybody, and our National Guard, because the job that they've done, whether it's in Washington, D.C., where we have a totally safe city, where it was one of the most unsafe cities anywhere in the world, frankly, and now we have no crime in Washington, D.C. We haven't had a killing. We had the terrorist attack a few weeks ago. A little bit of a different kind of a threat, but we haven't had a killing in a long period of time, 6-7 months. We used to have two, on average, 2 a week in Washington, our capital. We don't have that anymore. The restaurants are opening. Everyone's happy. They're walking their daughters. They're walking their children, their wives. They walk to restaurants. Restaurants are opening all over Washington, D.C. So I want to thank the National Guard. I want to thank our military. And I want to thank law enforcement. Been amazing. And they should do it with more cities. We're doing it, as you know, and we're doing it in Memphis, Tennessee right now, and crime is down. We've just sort of started a few weeks ago, but crime is down now 77%. And the governor of Louisiana called, great person, and he wanted us to help him, as you know, in a certain very nice part of Louisiana. And we have done that. It was a rough section, and we have crime down. I understand it's down to almost nothing already after 2.5 weeks. New Orleans, it's down to almost nothing. And we've only been there for 2.5 weeks. Can't imagine why governors wouldn't want us to help. We also helped, as you know, in Chicago. Then crime went down a little bit there. We did a very small help because we had no working ability with the governor. The governor was a disaster and the mayor was a disaster, but it knocked down crime. But we're pulling out of there. When they need us, we'll know. You'll know. You'll be writing about it. And likewise, Los Angeles, where we saved Los Angeles early on, where the head of the police department made a statement that if the federal government didn't come in, we would have lost Los Angeles. That's long after the fires. That's when they had the riots in Los Angeles. We did a great job. Got no credit for it whatsoever, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. We don't need the credit. But we'll be pulling out when they need us. They'll call, or we'll go back if we have to. We'll go back. But we did a great job in various cities. But the place that we're very proud of is Washington, D.C., because it's our nation's capital. We took it from being a crime-ridden mess to being one of the safest cities in the country. But the gangs that they sent raped, tortured, and murdered American women and children. They were in all of the cities I mentioned, Tren de Aragua. And they were sent by Maduro to terrorize our people. And now Maduro will never again be able to threaten an American citizen or anybody from Venezuela. There will no longer be threats. For years, I've highlighted the stories of those innocent Americans whose lives were so heartlessly robbed by this Venezuelan terrorist organization. Really one of the worst. One of the worst. They say the worst. Americans like 12-year-old Jocelyn Nungari from Houston. Beautiful Jocelyn Nungari. What happened to her? They, as you know, they kidnapped, assaulted, and murdered by Tren de Aragua animals. They murdered Jocelyn and left her dead under the bridge. There was a bridge that will never be the same to so many people after seeing what happened. As I've said many times, the Maduro regime emptied out their prisons, sent their worst and most violent monsters into the United States to steal American lives. And they came from mental institutions and insane asylums. They came from prisons and jails. The reason I say both, they sound similar. Actually, prisons a little bit more hostile, a little bit tougher. A mental institution isn't as tough as an insane asylum, but we got them both. They sent from their mental institutions. They sent from their jails, prisons. They were drug dealers. They were drug kingpins. They sent everybody bad into the United States, but no longer. And we have now a border where nobody gets through. In addition, Venezuela unilaterally seized and sold American oil, American assets, and American platforms, costing us billions and billions of dollars. They did this a while ago, but we never had a president that did anything about it. They took all of our property. It was our property. We built it. And we never had a president that decided to do anything about it. Instead, they fought wars that were 10,000 miles away. We built Venezuela oil industry with American talent, drive, and skill, and the socialist regime stole it from us during those previous administrations, and they stole it through force. This constituted one of the largest thefts of American property in the history of our country. Considered the largest theft of property in the history of our country. Massive oil infrastructure was taken like we were babies, and we didn't do anything about it. I would have done something about it. America will never allow foreign powers to rob our people or drive us back into and out of our own hemisphere. That's what they did. Furthermore, under the now deposed dictator Maduro, Venezuela was increasingly hosting foreign adversaries in our region and acquiring menacing offensive weapons that could threaten U.S. interests and lives. And they used those weapons last night. Potentially in league with the cartels operating along our border. All of these actions were in gross violation of the core principles of American foreign policy, dating back more than 2 centuries, and not anymore. All the way back, it dated to the Monroe Doctrines, and the Monroe Doctrine is a big deal, but we've superseded it by a lot, by a real lot. They now call it the Donroe Document. I don't know. It's Monroe Doctrine. We sort of forgot about it. It was very important, but we forgot about it. We don't forget about it anymore. Under our new national security strategy, American dominance in the Western Hemisphere will never be questioned again. Won't happen. So just in concluding, for decades, other administrations have neglected or even contributed to these growing security threats in the Western Hemisphere. Under the Trump administration, we are reasserting American power in a very powerful way in our home region. And our home region is very different than it was just a short while ago. The future will be, and we did this in my first term. We had great dominance in my first term, and we have far greater dominance right now. Everyone's coming back to us. The future will be determined by the ability to protect commerce and territory and resources that are core to national security. These are core to our national security. Just like tariffs they've made our country rich, and they've made our national security stronger than ever before. But these are the iron laws that have always determined global power. And we're going to keep it that way. We will secure our borders. We will stop the terrorists. We will crash the cartels, and we will defend our citizens against all threats, foreign and domestic. Other presidents may have lacked the courage or whatever to defend America, but I will never allow terrorists and criminals to operate with impunity against the United States. This extremely successful operation should serve as warning to anyone who would threaten American sovereignty or endanger American lives. Very importantly, the embargo on all Venezuelan oil remains in full effect. The American Armada remains poised in position, and the United States retains all military options until United States demands have been fully met and fully satisfied. All political and military figures in Venezuela should understand what happened to Maduro can happen to them, and it will happen to them if they aren't just, fair, even to their people. The dictator and terrorist Maduro is finally gone, and Venezuela people are free. They're free again. It's been a long time for them, but they're free. America is a safer nation. This morning, it's a prouder nation this morning because it didn't allow this horrible person and this country that was doing very bad things to us. It didn't allow it to happen. And the Western Hemisphere is right now a much safer place to be. So I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank General Raisin Cain. He's a fantastic man. I've worked with a lot of generals. I worked with some I didn't like. I worked with some I didn't respect. I worked with some that just weren't good. But this guy is fantastic. I watched last night one of the most precise attacks on sovereignty. I mean, it was an attack for justice. And I'm very proud of him, and I'm very proud of our Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, who I'm going to ask to say a few words. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, can you explain how the U.S. will run Venezuela?
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Finally, a commander-in-chief the world respects and the American people deserve. And as the President said, words can barely capture the bravery and the power and the precision of this historic operation. A massive joint military and law enforcement raid flawlessly executed by the greatest Americans our country has to offer. American warriors are second to none, the best in the world and the best of our country. What all of us witnessed last night was sheer guts and grit, gallantry, and glory of the American warrior. I'm simply humbled by such men, and I tip my hat to our chairman, Dan Raisin Cain, and all those Americans who stood watch last night. Our warriors are the elite of America, and again, President Trump has your back. No other country on planet Earth, and it's not even close, could pull this kind of operation off. And no other president has ever shown this kind of leadership, courage, and resolve. The most powerful combination the world has ever seen. As the president said, our adversaries remain on notice. America can project our will anywhere, anytime. The coordination, the stealth, the lethality, the precision, the very long arm of American justice, all on full display in the middle of the night. Nicolas Maduro had his chance, just like Iran had their chance, until they didn't and until he didn't. He effed around and he found out. President Trump is deadly serious about stopping the flow of gangs and violence to our country. Deadly serious about stopping the flow of drugs and poison to our people. Deadly serious about getting back the oil that was stolen from us. And deadly serious about reestablishing American deterrence and dominance in the Western Hemisphere. This is about the safety, security, freedom, and prosperity of the American people. This is America first. This is peace through strength. And the United States War Department is proud to help deliver it. Welcome to 2026, and under President Trump, America is back. I'd like to welcome now our chairman, Chairman Raisin Cain, to give a few more details about the operation. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning. Last night, on the order of the President of the United States, and in support of a request from the Department of Justice, as the President said, the United States military conducted an apprehension mission in Caracas, Venezuela, to bring to justice two indicted persons, Nicolas and Cecilia Maduro. This operation, known as Operation Absolute Resolve, was discreet, precise, and conducted during the darkest hours of January 2nd, and was the culmination of months of planning and rehearsal, an operation that, frankly, only the United States military could undertake. What I'd like to do this morning is talk to you through some of the preparation and the details without compromising any of our tactics, techniques, and procedures. There is always a chance that we'll be tasked to do this type of mission again. Our interagency work began months ago and built on decades of experience of integrating complex air, ground, space, and maritime operations. While the past 2 decades have honed the skills of our special operations forces, this particular mission required every component of our joint force, with soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Guardians working in unison with our intelligence agency partners and law enforcement teammates in an unprecedented operation. We leveraged our unmatched intelligence capabilities and our years of experience in hunting terrorists, and we could not have done this mission without the incredible work by various intelligence agencies, including the CIA, NSA, and NGA. We watched, we waited, we prepared, we remained patient and professional. This mission was meticulously planned, drawing lessons from decades of missions over the last many years, many missions over these last many years. This was an audacious operation that only the United States could do. It required the utmost of precision and integration within our joint force. And the word integration does not explain the sheer complexity of such a mission. An extraction so precise it involved more than 150 aircraft launching across the Western Hemisphere in close coordination, all coming together in time and place to layer effects for a single purpose: to get an interdiction force into downtown Caracas while maintaining the element of tactical surprise. Failure of one component of this well-oiled machine would have endangered the entire mission, and failure is never an option for America's joint force. Those in the air over Caracas last night were willing to give their lives for those on the ground and in the helicopters. Let me talk a little bit about the preparation. After months of work by our intelligence teammates to find Maduro and understand how he moved, where he lived, where he traveled, what he ate, what he wore, what were his pets, in early December, our force was set pending a series of aligned events. Key was choosing the right day to minimize the potential for civilian harm and maximize the element of surprise, and minimize the harm to the indicted personnel, so as the president said, they could be brought to justice. And as the president said earlier today, weather in Venezuela is always a factor this time of the year. And over the weeks through Christmas and New Year's, the men and women of the United States military sat ready, patiently waiting for the right triggers to be met and the president to order us into action. Last night, the weather broke just enough, clearing a path that only the most skilled aviators in the world could maneuver through. Ocean, mountain, low cloud ceilings. But when tasked with a mission, this organization does not quit. At 10:46 p.m. Eastern Time last night, the president ordered the United States military to move forward with this mission. He said to us, and we appreciate it, Mr. President, good luck and Godspeed. And those words were transmitted to the entire joint force. Over the course of the night, aircraft began launching from 20 different bases on land and sea across the Western Hemisphere. In total, more than 150 aircraft, bombers, fighters, intelligence, reconnaissance, surveillance, rotary wing were in the air last night. Thousands and thousands of hours of experience were airborne. Our youngest crew member was 20, and our oldest crew member was 49. And there's simply no match for American military might. As the night began, the helicopters took off with the extraction force, which included law enforcement officers, and began their flight into Venezuela at 100 feet above the water. As they approached Venezuelan shores, the United States began layering different effects provided by Spacecom, Cybercom, and other members of the interagency to create a pathway. Overhead, those forces were protected by aircraft from the United States Marines, the United States Navy, the United States Air Force, and the Air National Guard. The force included F-22s, F-35s, F-18s, EA-18s, E-2s, B-1 bombers, and other support aircraft, as well as numerous remotely piloted drones. As the force began to approach Caracas, the Joint Air Component began dismantling and disabling the air defense systems in Venezuela, employing weapons to ensure the safe passage of the helicopters into the target area. The goal of our air component was, and always will be to protect the helicopters and the ground force and get them to the target and get them home. As the force crossed the last point of high terrain where they'd been hiding in the clutter, we assessed that we had maintained totally the element of surprise. As the helicopter force ingressed towards the objective at low level, we arrived at Maduro's compound at 1:01 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, or 2:01 a.m. Caracas local time, and the apprehension force descended into Maduro's compound and moved with speed, precision, and discipline towards their objective and isolated the area to ensure the safety and security of the ground force while apprehending the indicted persons. On arrival into the target area, the helicopters came under fire, and they replied with that fire with overwhelming force in self-defense. One of our aircraft was hit, but remained flyable, and as the President said earlier today, all of our aircraft came home, and that aircraft remained flyable during the rest of the mission. As the operation unfolded at the compound, our air and ground intelligence teams provided real-time updates to the ground force, ensuring those forces could safely navigate the complex environment without unnecessary risk. The force remained protected by overhead tactical aviation. Maduro and his wife, both indicted, gave up and were taken into custody by the Department of Justice, assisted by our incredible U.S. military with professionalism and precision, with no loss of U.S. life. After securing the indicted persons, the force began to prep for departure. Helicopters were called in to exfiltrate the extraction force, while fighter aircraft and remotely piloted aircraft provided overhead coverage and suppressive fire. There were multiple self-defense engagements as the force began to withdraw out of Venezuela. The force successfully exfiltrated and returned to their afloat launch bases, and the force was over the water at 3:29 a.m. Eastern Standard Time with indicted persons on board. And both Maduro and his wife were embarked aboard the USS Iwo Jima. In closing, what we've witnessed today is a powerful demonstration of America's joint force. We think, we develop, we train, we rehearse, we debrief, we rehearse again and again, not to get it right, but to ensure that we cannot get it wrong. Our jobs are to integrate combat power so when the order comes, we can deliver overwhelming force at the time and the place of our choosing against any foe anywhere in the world. I am immensely proud today of our joint force and filled with gratitude to represent them here today. There is simply no mission too difficult for these incredible professionals and the families that stand by them and support them. As we stand here this morning, our forces remain in the region at a high state of readiness, prepared to project power, defend themselves, and our interests in the region. This operation is a testament to the dedication and unwavering commitment to justice and our resolve to hold accountable those who threaten peace and stability. In closing, I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to the brave men and women who executed this mission. Their courage and tireless commitment to our nation are what makes us strong. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and thank you, Mr. President.
Well, I don't have much to add to what you've heard now, other than the following points. Nicolas Maduro was indicted in 2020 in the United States. He is not the legitimate president of Venezuela. That's not just us saying it. The first Trump administration, the Biden administration, the second Trump administration, none of those three recognized him. He's not recognized by the European Union and multiple countries around the world. He is a fugitive of American justice with a $50 million reward, which I guess we saved $50 million. And
we should make sure.
Yeah, exactly. But
don't let anybody claim it. Nobody deserves it but us.
But I want to be clear about one thing. Nicolas Maduro had multiple opportunities to avoid this. He was provided multiple very, very, very generous offers and chose instead to act like a wild man, chose instead to play around. And the result is what we saw tonight. The other message here is the following. You have a guy, like many people around the world, they like to play games. You have a guy who decides he's going to invite Iran into his country, is going to, do the confiscation of American oil companies, is going to flood our country with gang members, is going to take Americans prisoner and try to hold them for hostage and trade them like he was able to do with the Biden administration. Basically likes to play games all this time and thinks nothing's going to happen. And I hope what people now understand is that we have a president. The 47th president of the United States is not a game player. When he tells you that he's going to do something, when tells you he's going to address a problem, he means it. He actions it. I can tell you, I've watched this process now for 14, 15 years, been around it. Everybody talks. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. When I get there, we're going to do this. We're going to take. This is a president of action. Like, I don't understand yet how they haven't figured this out. And now, if you don't know, now you know. Because this is the way it's going to play out. And I think people need to understand that this is not a president that just talks and does letters and press conferences. And, if he says he's serious about something, he means it. And this is something that was a direct threat to the national interest of the United States, and the president addressed it. There's a president of peace, by the way. I told you what I just said earlier. This guy had multiple opportunities to find his way somewhere else and figure out another. He could have been living somewhere else right now, very happy. But instead, he wanted to play big boy. And so now, he's got other sets of problems on his hands. And but I think the message here should be for the world. Look, the president doesn't go out looking for people to pick fights with. He's not generally wants to get along with everybody. We'll talk and meet with anybody. But don't play games. Don't play games with this president's in office, because it's not going to turn out well. And so I hope that, I guess that lesson was learned last night, and we hope it'll be instructive moving forward.
Is that a message for Cuba? Mr. President.
Mr. President, you said that the U.S. is going to run Venezuela. So who's in power right now?
Well, we're going to be running it with a group, and we're going to make sure it's run properly. We're going to rebuild the oil infrastructure, which will cost billions of dollars. It'll be paid for by the oil companies directly. They will be reimbursed for what they're doing, but that's going to be paid. And we're going to get the oil flowing the way it should be. As you know, it was just a minor flow. It was actually a minor flow for what they have. But we're going to run it properly, and we're going to make sure the people of Venezuela are taken care of. We're going to make sure the people that were forced out of Venezuela by this thug are also taken care of.
Mr. President, does the U.S. running the country mean that U.S. troops will be on the ground? How will that work?
Well, they always say boots on the ground. Oh, so we're not afraid of boots on the ground if we have to have. We had boots on the ground last night at a very high level, actually. We're not afraid of it. We don't mind saying it. But we're going to make sure that that country is run properly. We're not doing this in vain. This is a very dangerous attack. This is an attack that could have gone very, very badly. Could have gone very badly. We could have lost a lot of people last night. We could have lost a lot of dignity. We could have lost a lot of equipment. The equipment is less important, but we could have lost a lot. And we're going to make sure that this is proper. We're there now. We're ready to go again if we have to. We're going to run the country right. It's going to run very judiciously, very fairly. It's going to make a lot of money. We're going to give money to the people. We're going to reimburse people that were taken advantage of. We're going to take care of everybody. It's very important. We couldn't let them get away with it. They stole our oil. We built that whole industry there. And they just took it over like we were nothing. And we had a president that decided not to do anything about it. So we did something about it. We're late, but we did something about it. Yeah, please.
Can you explain the exact mechanism by which you're going to run the country? Are you going to designate a U.S. official to coordinate?
It's all being done right now. We're designating people. We're talking to people. We're designating various people, and we're going to let you know who those people are.
What's the group you mentioned that would run Venezuela?
Well, it's largely going to be, for a period of time, the people that are standing right behind me. We're going to be running it. We're going to be bringing it back. It's a dead, I talk about a dead country. A year and a half ago, we were a dead country. Now we're the hottest country anywhere in the world. We're a country doing better than any country anywhere in the world. And it required leadership. Venezuela has a lot of bad people in there, a lot of bad people that shouldn't be leading. We're not going to take a chance that one of those people take over for Maduro. So you can look at, and others, we have fantastic people, including people in the military. So we're going to have a group of people running it until such time as it can be put back on track, make a lot of money for the people, and give people a great way of life, and also reimbursement for people in our country that were forced out of Venezuela.
You said earlier today that you weren't going to back Machado to come back and be the opposition leader in your Fox and Friends interview. And then you also mentioned the vice president of Venezuela. Are you going to work with the vice president of Venezuela, or how do you foresee the relationship
Well, I
going?
understand she was just sworn in, but she was, as you know, picked by Maduro. So Marco's working on that directly. He's just had a conversation with her, and she's essentially willing to do what we think is necessary to make Venezuela great again. Very simple.
Mr. President, Colombian President Gustavo Petro, a couple weeks ago, he said he's got to watch his ass. And today he said he's not concerned about anything happening to him in the aftermath of this operation. So just what your message is
Well,
about
he
that.
has cocaine mills. He has factories where he makes cocaine. And yeah, I think I stick by my first statement. He's making cocaine. They're sending it into the United States. So he does have to watch his ass.
Mr. President, did you notify any members of Congress in advance?
Marco, do you want to talk about that? Because you were involved.
Sure. We called members of Congress immediately after. This was not the kind of mission that you can do congressional notification on. It was a trigger-based mission in which conditions had to be met night after night. We watched and monitored that for a number of days. So it's just simply not the kind of mission you can call people and say, hey, we may do this at some point in the next 15 days. But it's largely a law enforcement function. Remember, at the end of the day, at its core, this was an arrest of 2 indicted fugitives of American justice, and the Department of War supported the Department of Justice in that job. Now, there are broader policy implications here, but it's just not the kind of mission that you can pre-notify because it endangers the mission.
Well, sir, if I can add one thing to that. Congress has a tendency to leak. This would not be good. If they leaked, General, I think it would have been maybe a very different result. But I have to say, they knew we were coming at some point, We had a lot of ships out there. They sort of knew we were coming. We were there. But Congress will leak, and we don't want leakers.
Mr. President, you were one of the only people to watch this all play out live. What was Maduro doing when the U.S. forces entered what I assume would be his home? And also, was there any point where the U.S. was considering if Maduro pushed back or resisted killing Maduro?
It could have happened. It could have happened. He was trying to get into a safe place. The safe place is all steel. And he wasn't able to make it to the door because our guys were so fast. They went through the opposition so fast. And there was a lot of opposition. People were wondering, do we get them by surprise? Sort of surprised, but they were waiting for something. There was a lot of opposition. There was a lot of gunfire. You saw some of it today. But he was trying to get to a safe place, which wasn't safe because we would have had the door blown up in about 47 seconds, they say on average, regardless of how thick the steel was. It was a very thick door. It was a very heavy door, but he was unable to get to that door. He made it to the door. He was unable to close it.
So where's Maduro going to be?
Go ahead, finish.
Where is Maduro going to be in the time being right now? Do you know his exact
Well,
whereabouts?
eventually, ultimately, in the near future, he's going to be brought to New York.
And where is he going to be held? Where is he going to be held in New York? Do you know?
That's going to be up to the officials that do these things.
Mr. President, the U.S. has something of a mixed track record of ousting dictators without necessarily a plan for what comes afterwards.
Not with
Did
me,
that weigh on your decision?
Well, that's when we had different presidents, but with me, that's not true. With me, we've had a perfect track record of winning. We win a lot, and we win. If you look at Soleimani, you look at al-Baghdadi, you look at the Midnight Hammer. Midnight Hammer was incredible. Right now, you wouldn't have peace in the Middle East. We have essentially peace in the Middle East because of that. If we weren't successful with Midnight Hammer, you wouldn't have peace in the Middle East. So, with me, you've had a lot of victory. You've had only victories. You've had no losses. Yeah.
Mr. President, can you? How long do you expect the U.S. to run Venezuela, and how soon do you want Venezuelan people to hold elections?
So I'd like to do it quickly, but it takes a period of time. You know, we're rebuilding. We have to rebuild their whole infrastructure. The infrastructure is rotted. It's actually very dangerous. It's blow-up territory. Oil is very dangerous. It's a very dangerous thing to take out of the ground. It can kill a lot of people. It has killed a lot of people doing just that. The infrastructure is old. It's rotted. Much of it is stuff that we put there 25 years ago, and we're going to be replacing it. And we're going to take a lot of money out so that we can take care of the country.
Are you saying that Secretary Rubio and
Mr. President, China, Russia, and Iran have interests in Venezuela. How does this operation affect your relationships with them when it comes to the oil and drugs?
In terms of China and Russia, Russia when we get things straightened out. But in terms of other countries that want oil, we're in the oil business. We're going to sell it to them. We're not going to say we're not going to get it. In other words, we'll be selling oil. Probably in much larger doses because they couldn't produce very much because their infrastructure was so bad. So we'll be selling large amounts of oil to other countries, many of whom are using it now, but I would say many more will come.
Are you saying that, Mr. President, are you saying that?
Mr. President, thank you. What is your message to the people of Venezuela today? Of course, the civilian population specifically, they have a lot of questions. What is your message to the people of Venezuela?
That you're going to have peace, justice. You're going to have some of the riches that you should have had for a long period of time. It was stolen from you. But you're going to have peace and you're going to have safety. You're going to have justice. You're going to have a country. You're going to have a real country. You're going to have potentially a great country. You know, if you go back 20 years, maybe even a little longer ago, that was a great country. And they destroyed it. Remember I said that if we lose this election, the United States will be Venezuela on steroids. That's what would have happened. Had we lost the election, the 2024 election, we suffered so badly. When you look at the border from 2020, what they did, what Joe Biden administration did to our country should never be forgotten. But if we had to go through another year of that, we would be exactly where Venezuela was in terms of, I used to say, if they win, we're going to be Venezuela on steroids, and that's what would have happened.
President, thank you. Are you saying that Secretary Hegseth and Rubio are going to be running Venezuela, and will you be sending in U.S. military troops to provide?
They're going to be a team that's working with the people of Venezuela to make sure that we have Venezuela right. Because for us to just leave, who's going to take over? I mean, there is nobody to take over. You have a vice president who's been appointed by Maduro. And right now she's the vice president, and she's, I guess, the president. She was sworn as president just a little while ago. She had a long conversation with Marco, and she said, we'll do whatever you need. I think she was quite gracious, but she really doesn't have a choice. We're going to have this done right. We're not going to just do this with Maduro, then leave like everybody else, leave and say, let it go to hell. If we just left, it has zero chance of ever coming back. We'll run it properly. We'll run it professionally. We'll have the greatest oil companies in the world go in and invest billions and billions of dollars and take out money, use that money in Venezuela. And the biggest beneficiary are going to be the people of Venezuela. And also, I can't stress this strongly enough, the people that got thrown out of Venezuela that are now in the United States, and frankly, some want to stay, and some probably want to go back. Yeah.
So, Mr. President, what is being done to protect Americans in the country, and were any of the detained Americans
Well, right now they're very
last
protected because nobody's going to mess with us. They're very protected. The people of, and we let them know that you better not touch one of them.
Are you concerned that bad elements of the Maduro regime will remain in place?
Well, we know who they are. We're on them, and they're acting much differently now than they would have acted 2 days ago.
And what do you say
wait,
about
behind you, please.
Mr. President, why is running a country in South America America first?
Well, I think it is because we want to surround ourselves with good neighbors. We want to surround ourselves with stability. We want to surround ourselves with energy. We have tremendous energy in that country. It's very important that we protect it. We need that for ourselves. We need that for the world. And we want to make sure we can protect it. Yes, sir. Please, go ahead.
Yeah, is there a message here for Cuba and Diaz-Canel?
Well, Cuba's an interesting case. Cuba is, not doing very well right now. That system has not been a very good one for Cuba. The people there have suffered for many, many years. And I think Cuba is going to be something we'll end up talking about, because Cuba is a failing nation right now, very badly failing nation. And we want to help the people. It's very similar in the sense that we want to help the people in Cuba, but we want to also help the people that were forced out of Cuba and living in this country. Do you want to say something about that, Marco, please?
Well, I just gave you a statement a few minutes ago about, when the president speaks, you should take him seriously. So, suffice it to say, Cuba is a disaster. It's run by incompetent, senile men, and in some cases, not senile, but incompetent nonetheless. It has no economy. It's in total collapse. And by the way, they were, all of the guards that helped protect Maduro, this is well known, their whole spy agency, all that were full of Cubans. They basically, it's amazing. This poor island took over Venezuela in some cases. One of the biggest problems the Venezuelans have is they have to declare independence from Cuba. They tried to basically colonize it from a security standpoint. So, yeah, look, if I lived in Havana and I was in the government, I'd be concerned, at least a little bit.
Cutting off the oil flow to Cuba from Venezuela?
Well, the president already announced a week ago that anything that's sanctioned, it's sanctioned oil, it's not going to be allowed to get there. So that's an egregious.
We've just been listening to President Trump's news conference at Mar-a-Lago. That's going to conclude this portion of NBC News' special report. You can continue to watch our special coverage of the U.S. attack on Venezuela on our streaming network, NBC News Now, online at NBCNews.com, and a full wrap-up tonight on Nightly News. I'm Tom Llamas reporting today from Miami. We thank you for watching this special report.
We have to have energy that's real energy, not where they're getting 4% and 5% of the energy out of the ground. You take a look. It was such a disaster. So what's going to happen with Venezuela, I think, over the next period of a year is going to be a great thing. And the people of Venezuela will be the biggest beneficiaries.
Going to send in the U.S. military.
Mr. President, thank you. What did you last speak to Maduro about when you spoke? And is the
Well,
US
I don't want to get
at war
into
with
the
Venezuela?
conversations, but I did have conversations with him, and I said, you got to surrender. And I actually thought he was pretty close to doing so, but now he wished he did, yeah.
You said that Maduro is responsible for drug trafficking. You recently pardoned the former president of Honduras, who was convicted of many drug trafficking. Can you explain how these two situations are
Well,
different? And would you ever pardon Maduro?
I endorsed, as you know, the winning president, the man who won in Honduras. I endorsed the man who won in Chile. I endorsed the man who won in Argentina. And we are doing very well with that whole group. What the man that I pardoned was, if you could equate it to us, he was treated like the Biden administration treated a man named Trump. That didn't work out too well for them. This was a man who was persecuted very unfairly. He was the head of the country. He was persecuted very unfairly. And there are a number of them. And we felt that it was a very unfair situation that happened to him. He's also a party member of the man who won. So obviously the people liked what I did. And one of the reasons that was done is because of the fact that the party in power felt very strongly that that man was treated very badly. I studied it very quickly, and then I studied it in great detail. I went to a lot of the people standing behind me, and they felt that that man was persecuted and treated very badly. That's why I gave him a pardon.
You referenced boots on the ground earlier. Can you just sort of button this up? Do you envision the U.S. military having a presence in Venezuela as the U.S. runs that
Well,
country?
no, we're going to have a presence in Venezuela as it pertains to oil, because we have to have, we're sending our expertise in. So you may need something, not very much. But no, we're going to be taking out a tremendous amount of wealth out of the ground. And that wealth is going to the people of Venezuela and people from outside of Venezuela that used to be in Venezuela. And it goes also to the United States of America in the form of reimbursement for the damages caused us by that country. So I want to thank you all very much. Thank you. Do you have one? Yes, please. You were so nice before. I'm going to give you the final question. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr.
Unless it's a
President.
bad question, in
It's
which
about
case I'll
Putin.
go one word. It's about who?
It's about Putin, if you want.
About Putin. Well, that's
Okay.
always nice
You had
to
a
talk
phone-
about Putin.
You had a phone call with him
Yeah.
on Monday. Did he talk at all about Maduro? Did y'all talk about this?
No, we didn't.
And
We
then-
never spoke about Maduro.
Are you mad at him right now? I mean, there's this
I'm not
intelligence.
thrilled with Putin. I'm not thrilled with Putin. He's killing too many people. I thought that would be so. I settled 8 1/4 war. You know what the 1/4 was? Thailand and Cambodia. I did it again. They broke out, and I did it in about 5 hours, and I settled it. I'm giving myself 1/4, so I'm up to now 8 1/4. In other words, I settled the war, but then they broke out. They had a pretty bad breakout over the last 4 days. I got them to go back to peace. So I only give 1/4. I thought the easiest one would be, one of the easier ones would be Russia, Ukraine. It's not. And they both have done some pretty bad things. And look, that's Biden's war. That's not my war. But I want to stop the lives. Did you see where last month, 30,000, it was 27,000 the month before. 30,000, mostly soldiers, were killed this last month. 30,000. I want to stop that. You know, I got NATO to pay 5% instead of the 2% that they weren't paying. They weren't paying 2, and now they pay 5.
This is CNN Breaking News.